Oi! How goes it, everyone? I'm still waiting the final 3 minutes or so. So I figured we'd enjoy this little tune. Escalate. Yes. Excellent. Yes. Ladies and gents, that intro was made by a fan of mine, I think JD something. I'll leave a link at some point and credit him for that, but I promised him I'd use it at some point, so here it goes. Wichita, Kansas.
I love cheerleading. I started training when I was about 12, and then I made varsity my freshman year in high school. But I don't think I'll be cheering next year. My school has 2.5 miles of hallway, so that's why I'm in a wheelchair, because sometimes I have those bad days where I'm tired all the time.
Oh God, we've already started here, huh? Alright, well, let's see if this works.
And I can't walk that far. Oh, thank you.
Cheerleader.
Oh, cool. Is this more to put on my wall? I'm not.
I mean, to be fair, there was a girl who was straight out in a wheelchair that was a cheerleader. She couldn't walk, had no use below the neck.
Angry about it, because what if I can't make it better? Am I gonna be depressed and sad for the rest of my life about it? No. You're gonna have to move on and make do with the best you got.
Show me what you want. Oh, merry-go-round. It's hard because Jordan
Autism.
doesn't look disabled. And we have this problem
And here we go.
of
We're just starting with disabled kids straight out here.
going out in the world with this child who appears to be a normal boy and then doing something really naughty and people yelling at him thinking that he's
Fuck. My bad, ladies and gents. We'll go ahead and drag that to where it belongs. Yeah. Is that slightly more acceptable? I'd imagine. You can actually, see the stream. That might help a bit. Just a thought. No, that was my problem. My bad. Yes, that was the knockoff shoe flag.
doing it on purpose. You
No,
know, when
no.
they're little cute guys, you don't worry about them in the same way.
No, let's be serious. You can tell from that kid's face there's something not right.
It's when they get to be big, potentially menacing looking sized people. So we worry about the future.
Say three. Say three. Ohio State covered a fumble. They were about to score, and then got fumble, so that was good, yeah.
I love Pee Wee football. They look like big head mods and Blitz.
Everybody's been so supportive, but I think a lot of people don't know what to say, and then you have those moments where you're just like, this can't be real. This didn't happen to me. My baby didn't die.
Okay, so we're going straight there too. All right. Where do we go from here? How do you escalate when this is the 2-minute mark? Hi, Lil. The greater good. Everyone knows that's the greatest evil.
We respect the atom bomb, but how many of us respect this? This dish
Good
full
God.
of disease-producing
We've gone all the way back to 1940s footage. Good.
organisms, if allowed to grow unchecked, may be capable of more widespread loss of life than a dozen atom bombs. But scientists have found a strong defense: vaccines, which stimulate the formation of antibodies. Once formed, they may remain in the blood and confer immunity against another attack of the same disease.
All lies.
I think we take vaccines
Sleepy
for
Doodle.
granted because we no longer appreciate the seriousness of the diseases that vaccines prevent, because vaccines in some way have been a victim of their own success. I was a physician here in 1990.
Taking bets on how long till Google stops this. We probably have 30 minutes or so, and I've got another documentary lined up, so we'll see.
91, when there was a massive measles outbreak. We had 7 children who came into this hospital that died of measles. I mean, died of a disease that was easily and safely prevented by a vaccine.
Nah, fuck them.
And it's extremely hard
It's YouTube, Google, doesn't matter. They're one and the same at this point.
to watch that happen. It breaks your heart. When diseases were common, vaccines were an easy sell. Now what you see is people who are saying, I don't see these diseases at all anymore, and maybe these vaccines aren't as safe as they're purported to be. But history teaches us how effective vaccines are. Of course, it's reasonable that parents would argue that vaccines be held to the absolute highest standard of safety.
Wait, when does this become anti-vax?
These vaccines should cause virtually no severe side effects, and that's really pretty much true. I mean, it's extremely
You're gonna expose
rare
this
that
man
they
as a
would-
liar and a
would
fraud,
cause any
right?
problem, so.
I was taught in medical school that vaccines are safe and they're effective. I had no reason to believe otherwise.
Here is the man, Lawrence Pilvinsky. Holy shit, I did not expect to see you here. It is anti-vax himself. I
It
mean,
wasn't until the New York State passing of the hepatitis B mandate in 1991. It struck me as kind of odd that they were mandating a vaccine for newborn babies when babies were not at risk for developing
Devil.
hepatitis B infection. It made me question whether or not we're doing a service to children by giving them all these vaccines and injections.
of course not.
There's more than just an assumption that vaccines are safe. It is pretty much regarded as law. But I don't think it's that black and white. There are many grays. And
Many gray areas.
you have more and more people who are questioning it, and with good reason, because the science is not there to really state that vaccines are truly safe.
The science is also not there to state that vaccines are unsafe. However, you're presuming that position despite the fact that even your statistics don't bear it out. But please, do go on. You gotta go to Wichita, Kansas. Remember, gotta go to Wichita.
I'm so tired. Right after you guys left, I started having seizures. So, I'm really sore today. They're very sore today. My muscles are. I have received 3 Gardasil shots. After
Three
the
what?
shots, everything went crazy and I started getting sick.
Oh yeah, well Gardasil's already been withdrawn, so what are we doing here? I mean, this should have never been made. That's a given. But the ones that you're attacking also include things like the measles and or mumps and shit like that. What are we doing? These are unrelated ideals.
I've had 2 strokes.
So that's how we're here.
I have partial paralysis on the right side of my face. I have partial vision, and I'm having seizures.
Well, she started having problems early this week, and then Wednesday she had a really bad seizure, and then again on Thursday. So she's having an okay day today. She's just taking it easy. Okay, well, thank you very much,
Just watching YouTube.
Mr. Chris. I'll tell her you called. Bye-bye. My thought of damage from a vaccine was a sore muscle, you know, a rash maybe. I would have never dreamt that this was a side effect of a vaccine. She doesn't talk about it with her friends, you know. She don't talk to anyone. And if I talk to her about it, she gets mad. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe she thinks that if we don't talk about it, it's gonna go away.
God damn. Let's try this. I hear tell occasionally this works, so we'll wait until this comes live again. Yeah, there we go. Good deal. I've stretched it a bit, and hopefully now, even though you guys won't necessarily be able to see the whole thing, I've seen Hollywood movies still on here, put like this. So, maybe? Let's see. Alright, we're gonna go for it.
No, could you just cry?
It was MTV?
No.
CMT?
I don't know what it was.
Anyway, she saves this, and she says, Mom, you've got to see this. You've got to see this. And I said, okay, what? And I'm expecting to see some fashion show or whatever. And go ahead and show them.
Oh, God.
Each year in the U.S., thousands of women learn they have cervical cancer. I could be one less.
Oh, God, these fucking commercials. Yeah.
Because now there's Gardasil, the only vaccine that may help protect.
I would sit there and
This is gone, right?
watch like music videos or something, and every commercial they would come on, and I'm like, Mom, I don't want to like get cancer, and I'm like, Mom, I think I need to go get this. And
It got crazy.
I wasn't gonna have sex anytime soon, and I was like, I'm gonna wait till I'm married, so it's kind of like I'm not gonna get it anyways. So I don't know what got through my head.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, so who are we blaming? Vaccines, advertising, the companies that do both? What do we...
It got to her.
Who do we hate?
It got to my 15-year-old child.
And you let it.
They talked about it amongst themselves at school. Have you got that yet? You need to get that. Did you tell your mom about it?
I've seen class action lawsuits against Gardasil on TV as well, if I remember correctly. I can't recall.
I think we're the only country, other than perhaps New Zealand, that allows advertising on TV for pharmaceutical drugs. Our children, our population, we are bombarded with ads for Viagra. Drugs to do this, drugs to do that.
Yeah, so we're blaming advertisers for sure now, but I mean, do you have a point in addition to this? Or are we just going to stick to, I mean, is it the vaccines are unsafe? Is it that there's a statistically relevant number of people that'll have a problem? Or please help me understand.
Do you have restless leg syndrome? You may have PAD and not know it. There's a drug that's right for you. Ask your doctor.
Ask your doctor about
This is unbelievable what we're doing, and we're doing the same thing with vaccines.
Gardasil.
Gardasil.
With Gardasil, you could be one less.
Yes, this is clearly a white people conspiracy.
I have had so many young girls come up to me and say, I'm so happy, I'm one less. And I said, what do you mean you're one less? She says, I got Gardasil, so I'm one less cancer death. And I said, you know, if you got your pap smears, you would never have been a cancer death. The concept that our daughters are...
I'm not even joking at this point. It's pretty clear. Look at how bloodshot her eyes are.
Deaths waiting to happen is just not accurate. Our death rate in the United States from cervical cancer is 3 per 100,000. They have a much higher chance of being a motor vehicle accident death than they do of being a cervical cancer death. Merck was so egregious in their advertising and so aggressive, even though...
Now, this is potentially true. Do you want to have a discussion about this? I think there are whole countries in the world that don't allow this, and I agree with it, but what...
So very specifically true, nothing about their advertisement was false. It was false in its overall impressions.
This is South Florida's CBS 4 News.
Dr. Diane Harper is one of the world's top
What's a pap smear? You don't want to know, bud.
experts on the human papillomavirus. In fact, she's one of the leading scientists the pharmaceutical industries turn to. Speaking out for the first time on television, she expresses concerns over what she considers a rush to vaccinate.
We don't know yet what's going to happen when
Oh, this is her thing then. That's good. When you can go look at old archival footage, that's not inherently a good thing, documentary.
millions of doses of the vaccine have been given.
Hey, it's Barbara Lowe Fisher with the National Vaccine Information Center. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about what happened to Brianna. I understand she received 4 vaccines.
She calls me in tears. Mommy, I had a horrible headache all day long.
The National Vaccine Information Center was founded in...
What the hell? Parastosis and rubella just sitting there. Yeah, okay.
19...
I'm sure you're just paging through that, right?
82 by parents of vaccine-injured children to prevent vaccine injuries and deaths through public education and defend the informed consent ethic.
Are the unsung.
We started out in the early 1980s working with Congress on the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, which President Reagan...
Thank you for that glowing illustration, Princess Crazy Locks.
...signed into law in 1986. Then, what we did was we participated...
Yeah, it's equal to about 6,000 of half the country.
...on the government advisory committees that were set up under that law. We've been critics, yes, but we've also had one foot inside the system to convince those that are in power that things need to change. And we feel this is woefully...
It hasn't worked, so...
This issue has become...
Again? Damn, and I'm pausing too. Let's see. Let's see. No, that's not working. Well, it didn't work at all. Nope, 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 nope. Remove. That didn't work. So let's go back to... There we go. Boom. Alright, let's see if we can play it flipped, you cunts.
Come so polarized. You're either pro-vaccine or you're anti-vaccine. When you take a centrist position, like the National Vaccine Information Center, you are automatically put into a...
And don't worry, if this doesn't work, I have a little button I can hit right here and we go to the next documentary. It's not a big deal.
...category as being anti-vaccine. But the truth is that we're just trying to make vaccine policies and vaccines safer.
How come doctors
I blew
look
it
at
up
me
already.
like I have 3 heads when you go to these appointments? And
Yes.
I'm like, is this the first time in your career you've heard about this?
Well, and that's, you know, that's what we've been trying to do for 26 years is at least confirm for parents they're not crazy. They are not imagining anything. No. They're not alone. No. And I didn't set out to be an activist. I wanted to be a writer.
Awesome.
But my life took a very different turn when my son was...
Very good. Excellent. Let me see if... Alright, I guess I'll keep the monitor up on this instead of watching the chat through a pop-out. It's not going to be great on my bandwidth, but at least I'll be able to see live when it goes down.
Injured by a vaccine. I witnessed his reaction after we'd come back from the doctor's office. It was very quiet in the house. So I went upstairs and I found Chris sitting in a rocking chair, looking straight ahead as if he couldn't see me in the doorway. And I called out his name again and I watched his eyes roll back in his head till I could see the whites of his eyes and his head fall to his shoulder. After that, he became a different child, physically, mentally, and emotionally. He had been this bright, precocious baby, speaking in full sentences by the age of 2. After that shot, we got the diagnosis that he was minimally brain damaged.
Yeah, I don't know that you can implicitly say that this is absolutely the vaccine.
And the recommendation was to put him in a self-contained classroom for the learning disabled. I became committed to reforming the mass vaccination system, and I worked for 30 years to make vaccine policies safer. In the 1980s,
Yeah, you guys aren't going to be able to see this chart, basically. Sorry.
children were being asked to get 23 doses of 7 vaccines. In the last 3 decades, that number has grown to 69 doses of 16 vaccines.
I wouldn't know. I was somewhere in between there.
That's triple the numbers of doses of vaccines we gave our children in the early 1980s.
Has this been broken again?
Yeah, we're gonna get it fixed.
No, the brushes are done.
Lunch, I packed extra for after school snacks.
Okay.
You got something in your stomach yet?
No, you don't need these.
Yeah.
A little
Yeah, cool backwards chart.
Okay.
normal.
What in the hell are we watching?
Good job.
I've been in all kinds of care homes and shit, and I've never seen that before in my entire life. When something care-related startles me, wow.
Jordan is my older brother. He has autism. He acts like he's mean, but he's not. He just doesn't understand very well. I wish he could tell me what he thinks. I want to know, like, how he feels when something makes him angry or sad, like when something hurts him. But
I know when he's happy. He has this wonderful smile on his face. He giggles a lot. He's really silly.
So we're using kids on kids here. That's what this is. This is layers of kids being used. That's lovely.
I just wish we could communicate more often. But I got used to it, so.
Rates of autism are jumping, an alarming 10 to 17% every
Dr. Sanjay Gupta.
year.
Every 20 minutes in this country, another child is diagnosed with autism.
The question is there an epidemic of autism? I think the answer to that question is probably no. In the mid-1990s, we really broadened the definition of autism to include autism spectrum disorder, Asperger's, as well as other things. And I think that brought a lot more children under the umbrella who weren't there before.
All you have to do is ask the guidance counselors, the teachers, the principals, and all of them across the board will tell you that we are seeing a rise in the number of children with disabilities. That is clear. The CDC states that 1 in 110 children have
I would like to see if that's true or if our measurement have gone up.
autism. But autism is just one piece of a bigger problem. The bigger issue is that 1 in 6 kids in this country has some form of neurodevelopmental disability.
Yeah, is that overdiagnosing though? That's the question. Is this an actual pandemic we're seeing, or is this an overdiagnosis problem?
50 years ago, children didn't even get type 2 diabetes. Now, it's an emerging epidemic, as are a long list of ailments which used to be rare and have now been mainstreamed. Things like asthma and autism and acid reflux and arthritis, allergies, adult acne, attention deficit disorder. And that's just the A's.
Yeah, you walked entirely too far for that bit, man.
Vaccine safety is not just about autism. Autism is only one kind of brain and immune dysfunction that is associated with vaccination. Millions and millions of children now in America are chronically ill and disabled. And during the same time period,
I would love to see how they're accumulating those fucking stats. It's driving me nuts not to be able to snatch it like I usually can and just go look at it.
the numbers of doses of
I just have to listen to this fucking cunt say it like it's fact.
vaccines have more than tripled that we're giving our children. We have seen this explosion of chronic disease and disability. And to take off the table the use of a pharmaceutical product like a vaccine as a potential cofactor in this explosion of chronic disease and disability among our children
Potential cofactor.
is irresponsible.
So about 10 years ago, a mother came up to me and said, "Hey doc, did you know there's mercury in vaccines?" And I hadn't a clue. And so my question was, well, if mercury is in the vaccines,
Here we go.
what else is in the vaccines? So I open up the package inserts and I see mercury and aluminum,
of course,
and formaldehyde,
obviously,
and antibiotics, and then preservatives like polysorbate 80. So I asked the pediatric resident, I said, tell me, how
Brainwashing people for money that have kids. It's paid fear mongering. This is good.
does the body process those materials? She could not answer me. And no one in science can, because no one has looked.
You would think that the FDA would take each of those ingredients and study them in human infants to make sure that each of those ingredients are safe. Well, they haven't.
Yeah, I would actually agree that's probably true, Dark Firebrand. Honestly, I'm not even trying. That's probably true.
Done that. They've never taken
Apple seeds are covered in arsenic too, if I remember correctly, as are cherry pits. So, consider.
vaccine quantities of each of those ingredients and done any sort of safety testing to confirm that each one of those ingredients are safe.
So if you're not doing that kind of detailed analysis, and it's not that expensive to do, you simply can't make any statement about the safety of these compounds in the nervous system. But
Sweet.
It's one of the fundamental pillars of medicine that vaccines have saved millions of people around the world and therefore can't be questioned. And I think, in my view, everything in science can be questioned.
I don't think anybody operates under that at all, ever. I think most people acknowledge that you can look into these things. You just have to be able to show something.
I'm a neuroscientist by training, and my studies are in the origin of neurological disease. I develop animal models of Parkinson's and Lou Gehrig's disease.
Pretty good.
Recently, we've been looking at aluminum, which is common to many vaccines. It's used as an adjuvant. That means helper. Without the aluminum, the vaccine basically does not provide any long-term protection. And so my research has looked at injectable aluminum and how it might impact the nervous system. The difference between injectable aluminum versus dietary aluminum is that
dietary aluminum
that you eat is excreted fairly rapidly. Injectable aluminum, however, is meant to stick around, and that's precisely why it's there in the first place. That's what an adjuvant does.
Yeah, it just sticks around forever, right?
So we simply did the really simple experiment of taking the same stuff out of the vaccines, the aluminum hydroxide, and injecting it into mice, into the muscles, to see what would happen if we tried to mimic the vaccine schedule. We were quite surprised to see how rapidly the behavioral symptoms emerged. They showed not only behavioral deficits of motor function, but they ultimately showed cognitive deficits as well. And once we sacrificed the animals and started looking inside...
Sacrificed the animals. Okay, I already don't trust your medical opinion when this is the way you discuss the procedures, friend. You've completely lost my faith, I promise you that.
Their brains and spinal cords, we found massive damage to motor neurons. And so we may be creating the conditions for Parkinson's disease, Lou Gehrig's disease, Alzheimer's disease. Maybe not immediately, but maybe 20, 30, 40 years down the road.
Sure.
We had some concerns when we released the study that it might
Sorry, I'm reading the small print, ladies and gentlemen. Give me just a moment.
It's trigger.
Behavioral testing showed motor deficits in the aluminum treatment group. I'd like to look further into that.
It actually triggered a lot of silence. Pharma and the regulatory agencies largely ignored it, which is a very safe position to take, because if they wanted to counter what I've said with my studies, they should have just reached into their file folder and come up with their own study and said, Dr. Shaw is simply wrong because we did this study and look what we found. And after, 4 years, they haven't done that.
That's a really long time to hold that, guys, really. Why is it a cheerleader?
As a student at South High School, Gabby is definitely someone that stood out. Bouncy, bubbly, joyful, all the time. Academically, she was an A student. She was very conscientious in everything she did. It's just heart-wrenching to see the change. I wish I could find a cure for her.
We're back.
Oh, you're on your cheerleading outfit. Yay. You exerted yourself?
Yes.
When I first saw her, she was having problems with seizures, intractable headaches, chest pains.
Yeah, this is something that happens fairly randomly to people around this age sometimes.
And I found out that she began having problems following her Gardasil vaccinations. Now you gotta check your memory out here. Say 3 things to remember. See if you remember orange, otter, and 473 Tomato Street. Let me try it.
Orange, Otter, 473 Otter Street.
Tomato.
Tomato Street.
Right.
Yeah, Jawa, I think you're probably
understand
right.
Why I don't remember anything. I used to be 4.0, but I don't know why I'm getting Fs now. So obviously there is some reason. And it's not because I'm stupid, because I'm not stupid at all. So I just don't understand.
Close your eyes tight. Don't let me open them.
My neurologist, he's ruled out everything, and he's sure that it's the Gardasil shot.
Stick your tongue against your cheek. In my opinion, there's little room for doubt concerning that this condition was caused by the Gardasil.
Yeah, you know, I didn't even consider that. She's a cheerleader. She for sure could have bopped her head pretty good and then just played it off, and I never even considered that.
Every time she got another injection, she got worse and worse. I think Gardasil should be taken off the market and hasn't been well tested before it was placed in the general public.
The FDA has a particular process that's called fast tracking when there is a promising drug that comes forward. Gardasil, they had scheduled a 4-year trial, but after 15 months...
You know what I'd really like to find out? If there was any particular lobby that pushed this through, kind of like they did with the female horny drug. Yeah, I'd love to know that.
They went to the FDA and said, there is nothing like this vaccine on the market. Would you please consider this for fast track? And the FDA said yes. So within 6 months, they approved.
I always love it when they try and teach me with cartoons like I'm still supposed to be learning the Conjunction Junction song.
It, and as soon as they had it approved, Merck said, we will no longer continue our trial. We're going to stop our trial because our
How old is this? 2014. This is new, dude.
drug is now approved.
Sadly.
So therefore, we don't know the long-term side effects. We do know there have been reports of pancreatitis, reports of autoimmune disease, reports of transverse myelitis, and reports of juvenile ALS, which is uniformly fatal in adolescents.
We are very committed to the safety of our products, and we do everything we can to monitor that and maximize that. We're reassured by the data we generated in the course of our studies, documenting the safety and tolerability of the vaccine.
Gavi is an example of why no vaccine,
The National Vaccine Information Center.
particularly a vaccine for children, should ever
Look at those eyes.
be fast-tracked by the FDA. Less than 1% of all cancer deaths are for cervical cancer. And yet we now have a vaccine that was only studied in 1,200 girls under the age of 16 before it was recommended for universal use by the CDC in all 11 and 12-year-old girls in this country. That's not science, that's politics.
Sweet. Over the past decade, pharmaceutical companies have spent more money lobbying in Washington than any other industry, including oil and insurance.
Texas Governor Rick Perry has ordered that schoolgirls in his state must get the Gardasil shot. It's also worth
I'm so happy to be out of that fucking state.
pointing out that the AP says that Governor Perry has ties to Merck, including the fact that one of the company's lobbyists in the state of Texas is his former chief of staff.
Excellent. I'm not big on governors being allowed to do that anyway, and I'm liking that people push back regardless of where you stand on vaccination.
Public health was never defined in the federal constitution as a federal matter. Therefore, public health laws are state laws, vaccine laws are state laws. The way it works is the federal government recommends vaccines, the CDC, and the state governments mandate them. Different states have different exemptions. All states have medical exemptions. Every state but 2 has a religious exemption, and there are 18 states that have.
Damn, what are the 2 that don't? Where are the 2? Where did you just mark them all because fuck off? Like, did you seriously do that? Or did you... You did. You no, West Virginia, and I think that's Louisiana, no? Alabama? What's between those? Mississippi? Whatever. Okay, yeah, so...
An exemption for philosophical conscientious belief.
Sweet.
So where is this rally?
In Trenton, in front of City Hall, I think. New Jersey just passed a little over a year ago a law stating that there were 4 more vaccines that are now going to be mandated for children to get into school. That's why we're having the rally, to raise the awareness that New Jersey's going overboard. It leads the country in numbers of mandates of vaccines for children to get into school.
Jesus H, I don't want
And
to.
I think
This is like you literally just went on a tour of the world with this asshole, huh?
I think parents are pissed, and I don't blame them for being pissed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Sam.
We are standing publicly for the legal right to follow our conscience when making educated vaccine decisions for our families.
The only thing that we oppose is forced vaccination, violation of the informed consent principle. Informed consent means that you have full information about the benefits and risks of any medical intervention that can harm you. And that
Yeah, no, it's fine. Let's just let these people's kids die of preventable disease if that were actually functional, but it isn't. It is sadly a herd function, whether people are comfortable with that or not.
you have the ability to make a voluntary decision about whether or not you're going to accept that risk. And if the state can force you to put your life on the line or your child's life on the line for any medical intervention, then the state has too much power.
The fact is, sadly, that some people don't do what's best for them or their children unless it's mandated. I mean, so for example, car seats save lives for children, but it's not until
Yeah, but only like 1% of lives, so consider.
we really started to push that and make that a matter of law that people really started to use car seats for children. The problem is that, you know, we're a country that's founded on the notion of individual rights and freedoms. The term mandate, that you're forced to do anything, just feels wrong. I just wish we had a different word to use than mandate, something like good health requirement or something, because, you know, the term mandate just sits badly.
No, let's leave it mandate, so we're being honest. Let's not use the language game like they do in places like China, please. Let's stick to being honest with why we're doing it, and it's because not everyone keeps the best interest in heart. I'm fine with that. Let's
More than
please don't press
2,000
anything else.
Prince
Thank
George's
you.
County students have not gotten their state-mandated shots. Tonight, an ultimatum to some of those parents: come to court, get the shots, or else.
More than 1,600 students and their parents have been ordered to appear in circuit court for the
Why you show a black school?
children to
Oh
be
God, it is.
immunized.
Oh God, no. Why? We were having fun.
We can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way, but it's going to have to get done.
I went over there and saw the parents lining up. They had police with dogs and guns patrolling the courthouse.
Yeah, because people blow shit up for some dumb reasons, lady.
I thought to myself, there is something wrong with this. We shouldn't be summoning parents under threat of imprisonment and fines because they didn't get their children a hepatitis B vaccination or a chickenpox vaccination.
Not only could he infect a child too young, it can metamorphosize within him to something we haven't vaccinated against.
Hepatitis B is not polio, and chickenpox is not smallpox. But parents have been so conditioned to believe that every time a new vaccine comes out, that it's going to be mandated.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I would for sure pass on the chickenpox vaccine for my kid.
That they
Thank you, though.
haven't stood up and fought for the right to make these choices.
Yes, James, there have. There have indeed.
I deeply believe that vaccines are the best choice for almost all children. We don't have polio outbreaks in this country every summer anymore, and we don't have those because of immunization. It's a great accomplishment, but it's a fragile.
Is she the Attorney General? Is that why she gets to wear the little lapel things? Really? You get the little flags? Fucking congratulations.
We need to
Amazing.
remember that there are a number of people who can't be protected by vaccination. There are children who are too young to be vaccinated, but
fuck 'em.
still susceptible. There are children whose immune systems are compromised, so they can't get vaccinated.
Nah, fuck 'em.
That's the reason we want to get very high coverage.
Nah, fuck 'em.
It's a concept called herd or community immunity.
So in the concept of herd immunity, it's believed that when outbreaks occur, if enough people are vaccinated, the herd is sufficiently protected because the herd has been vaccinated.
So it's really
Yeah, remember polio? Yeah, I remember polio.
an ethical decision whether you agree to be vaccinated
And in the U.S., we have essentially believed that for the community as a whole, for the social fabric, it is better to insist on vaccination than to allow free rein.
As with any medication, vaccine, or whatever, there are always some risks.
Oh, good fucking God.
And so what we're really looking at are the benefits provided by that new vaccine outweighing the risks?
No. Never.
So
all vaccines should be banned.
they are saying that some people ethically can be sacrificed for the greater good.
What you're saying is ethically, more people should be sacrificed for your belief that vaccinations are bad. That's what you're saying. You've just defined your own fucking position.
But what they never bothered to find out, even if you accept that as a moral rationale, is how many were being sacrificed. 500? 5,000? 500,000? How many
How many would be sacrificed under your plan, dear?
are being sacrificed?
The CDC tracks the number of vaccine-related injuries through a voluntary program called the Vaccine Adverse Effects Reporting System, or VAERS. VAERS acknowledges on their website that underreporting is a problem and only a small fraction of injuries are counted.
Daddy's gonna get you. Come on, let's go. Let's go get dressed. Give me that binky.
Mr. Forrest, are you awake?
Holy shit, nice house.
I am Stephanie Christner. I am by training a psychiatrist.
Oh, so you got into a trade that traditionally one gets into to find out what's fucked up in you.
I have an 8-year-old son and a 3-year-old son, and I have a daughter who died.
Oh, here we go.
When it comes to death with vaccines, I think there are two issues that are going on. One is you have an immediate reaction to a component in the vaccine, like an anaphylactic shock. Like if you eat peanuts and you're allergic to peanuts, you will die. Your throat will close off.
Imagine if you just blinked once, lady. That'd be great. Please just blink.
And there's things in
Thank you.
vaccines that people are allergic to that they're not screened for,
Blink.
and that can happen immediately. But then there's also a delayed reaction, and that's something that takes place slowly over time due to
Are you a reptile?
chronic inflammation. And that's how my daughter died.
You're sure? Okay. I'm gonna eat it.
It's been a tough year. My daughter's name was Victoria Grace Boyd Christner. She was born August 22nd, 2008. She was beautiful and perfect, and it kind of completed our circle. Now, we had all these boys, and Stephanie now had her little girl.
I hate you for doing this documentary. You disgust me.
And it was awesome.
Hi, little Vic. It's your first Christmas. She was so happy and awake and alert.
Hi, Joss.
Then she was vaccinated with all of the routine vaccinations at the age of 2 months and was never the same after that.
She's got that psychiatric stare. That's what that is. That's her used to staring down psych patients.
Within that week, she became sick, more withdrawn, more irritable. She did not want to eat. And then sometime in there, she had an episode where she stopped breathing or had a seizure. I'm not sure what it was. And 911 actually comes out to our house, and she's fine by then. I just guess I was overreacting, and they looked at her, and everything seemed perfectly normal. They didn't run any tests on her, it seemed absolutely not needed at the time. And that was probably December 15th, and then, of course, we go in December 23rd and give a whole nother round of vaccinations.
And that did her in.
It was Valentine's weekend. Stephanie was going to go with her girlfriends out of town, so she lined up for our caretaker.
You kept all this. I hate when parents do this. This is not healthy. You have shrines in your house. This is not okay. Fuck.
Her to watch the kids.
Remember, I was eating breakfast about 10 o'clock, and I got a call, and the phone call was the husband of our caretaker, and he said, something's happened. Victoria stopped breathing. She's turning blue. When I pulled up to the house, there was emergency vehicles everywhere, and I knew then
I don't
that
see. I don't need this documentary. I feel very bad for this man and his loss, but I don't think it's fair for you to do this.
It happened when I went in the house and saw her on the floor, lying on her back, and her arms stretched out, and she wasn't moving. Then I had to call Stephanie, and her friend answered the phone, and I said, "Can you put Stephanie on the phone? Victoria's died." And
thanks.
She said, "What?" And I said, "Victoria's died."
Yeah, keep in mind she's a psychologist. Yeah.
She just was gone. And I have a child, and then I follow the rules, and I damage this child to the point that they die.
Yeah, again, you...
That's hard for me to understand.
I'm sure.
A lot of doctors try to convince their patients that vaccines are 100% safe.
Yeah, what's worse than a pile of dead babies? A pile of vaccinated dead babies.
And that parents have nothing at all to worry about. You don't even need to question the system. And I think doctors that...
I really don't trust doctors that decide to write book based on controversial subjects, friendo. I have a feeling what you're doing here is scraping for money because you weren't competent enough to operate your own practice.
Tell their patients that kind of information aren't telling the truth.
Your little Hot Topic doctor's outfit aren't selling me either, by the way.
Just like anything in medicine, there's always the risk of a possible reaction. Well, I've been looking into vaccines for about the last 15 years, ever since I had to start researching the decision for my own kids. But back then, I couldn't find any really good information, and I felt pretty ill-equipped as a pediatrician to answer patients' questions. I was advised...
Oh, so he has a practice and he's going to tell these people that after he wrote his little book thing, huh? Good, excellent.
By a lot of colleagues not...
The Sears Parenting Library. You have a bunch of books, my friend. Holy shit, you have a whole secondary career.
To write the book because...
Very good.
They knew the mainstream medical organizations would view the book as anti-vaccine.
We're on call this morning with some harsh criticism of a popular best-selling book. It's called The Vaccine Book, Making the Right Decision for Your Child. An analysis in the journal Pediatrics says the book is flawed, misguided, and puts kids at significant risk of preventable diseases.
Remember when people still messed up on the news?
You know, it's a very pro-vaccine book, but I dare, to suggest that there might be a safer way to vaccinate. Anytime I have a patient who is delaying vaccines, I certainly like to make sure that they're aware of what the disease risk is.
Delaying.
From the mainstream medical viewpoint, there's no issue. Patients should just comply with the vaccine schedule, don't ask questions, and get the schedule as is. But I feel that patients nowadays really want to be educated themselves.
I would prefer not to vaccinate, but I am going to do a select few of the vaccinations. And
there are a lot of patients out there that I feel were not vaccinating their children because they weren't offered an alternative. Right, go and lay her down. I see a lot of parents leave their pediatrician's office unvaccinated because they're not willing to get so many shots at once.
Oh, great. Now we're all going to jail.
I came out with a schedule that allows parents to get their children fully vaccinated, but we spread it out a little bit and we slow it down a little bit. If you're curious how...
There certainly are many parents now that are choosing to delay or withhold or separate vaccines. Pediatricians are faced with this all the time. As a physician, that's hard to watch. It's just very hard to watch.
It's hard to listen to you guys is what it's hard to do.
Watch people make a choice that's so ill-conceived, so poorly founded.
There has to be some trust involved. trust in the physician who is proposing the vaccination, trust in the system that's
See, this is the creator of the rubella vaccine.
developed the vaccine.
But try and sell that message in the 21st century. Trust me, I'm an expert. It doesn't work. I mean, we talk about wanting to empower parents so that they can make choices for their children that are the best choices, and that all appears to be a very logical, reasoned, empathetic thing to do.
Yeah, but the truth of the matter is like, we've seen the bell curve chart, and most people fall on the left half of that. Like, from a little bit past the curve and to the left, all those people, yeah, we kind of have to tell them things, and then we can't wait for them to go research it. We simply don't have that kind of time as a society. You've got to accept that at some level, right?
But the question is, are parents really in the best position to look at those data dispassionately and make the right decision? I don't think often they have that expertise. But that's just a very unpopular thing that I thought I'd say.
Americans are well aware that a number of prescription drugs that have been licensed as safe have been found to be unsafe after they're used by millions of people. And yet, when it comes to
We've gone way back on some of those, by the way.
vaccines, which are mandated by law, there's somehow this separation made.
Yeah, they operate under different premises and using different techniques. You must acknowledge that, right?
The vaccines couldn't possibly
Some of those were hormone-changing drugs.
be the same.
The majority of vaccine research is paid for by the vaccine manufacturers themselves.
No shit.
So the people who are approving the vaccines
Do you want to pay for it, friend?
are taking the word of the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, that's not even implicitly true.
The pharmaceutical companies have been allowed to be too present at the table at the FDA and the CDC. And I think a firewall needs to be built between those in government who are
Cool buzzword. You need to build a firewall, huh?
regulating, making policy for, and developing vaccines, and those pharmaceutical companies that are making profit off the sale of vaccines.
You know, it's no wonder parents are asking questions. It's because doctors that are making these policies are financially benefiting from these policies. The ACIP is the organization that approves vaccine policy for the United States. You have some doctors on that board that have a direct financial interest in these vaccines.
I like the laugh. Good cabal laugh. That was cool.
That's a huge conflict of interest.
I think the conflict of
I love the animation in this. I mean, cheesy as it is, it's fucking amusing.
interest issue hurts us. I mean, we see anything that has a financial side to it as evil. But these groups are made of people that are parents, that are giving these same vaccines to their children, that are closest to the data and know these data, are
No, people are insane about this.
still giving these vaccines to their children.
Now, once you become part of a corporation, you're no longer human. You must acknowledge this.
I'm not naive. I mean, I think pharmaceutical companies have done things that are aggressive or unethical or even arguably illegal. I don't see any of that on the vaccine side.
Hey, bud. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, you too.
We're back to trying to make the audience feel like shit. If you disagree with us, you want this to happen to kids. You're a monster.
As a baby, Jordan was just a typical baby. He met his milestones and was ahead of the curve on a few of them. Very social, had great eye contact. You know, everybody just said what a great little guy he was.
Uh-huh. Now we're at part 2 of Make Me Feel Like Shit.
And we just noticed over a period of a
I can't wait to get to the climate change one now.
few months that he no longer spoke. He started walking on his toes all the time and flapping his
Yep.
hands when he would get excited or
This is a form of autism. This is the one most commonly linked to diabetes, to injections.
Yeah.
Please don't.
You can see something's wrong.
Whole life.
And that one.
Proof against
Yeah,
massation.
but it's just like the sparkles.
He'd have been
going.
fine.
He looked sad all the time. I ended up taking him to my pediatrician. She just said, "Oh, he's autistic. That's how it goes sometimes. You know, they're born that way." But we felt like there was something medically going on with him.
Yeah, they have 9 heads. the whole family. It's a whole family of 9 heads, to be fair.
So we took him to this doctor, and he said the first thing I want to do is check him for heavy metals. I looked at those results, and the mercury was off
Hey, I broke a thing, so I'm a bit distracted.
the end of the page. I sort of freaked out. I thought, he's mercury poisoned. Where did that mercury come from?
We tested the paint. We tested the air.
2001.
I had the sawdust in my basement shop tested to see is there mercury in that. When we talked to Dr. Green about it, told him what we were doing, he said, you don't have to look for where the mercury is coming from. We know where it's coming from. It's in the vaccines that Jordan's been getting.
Morning, guys.
2001.
Since I began practicing in 1975, I saw one child with autism in the 80s, one child with autism in the early 90s, and then in the late 90s, I was literally flooded with patients. I've evaluated and treated now approximately 2,100 patients with autism.
It's been a while.
How you doing?
Oh, we're doing good. He's just got more of a mind of his own.
Sick. Cool setup, my dude. I've run a lot, and I've never thought to just have a mini strapped to his head. Yeah, it's a stimuli denial. It's probably got one of his favorite songs on a loop or something, but that's to deny the stimulation of auditory. I've just never seen it attached to just their forehead like that. That's neat.
And now, he's just not a little boy anymore.
How does he get his needs met? How is he at getting more complicated things?
Well, he's getting clever. When he wants to eat a hot meal, he'll bring me a spatula and a hot pad.
Sweet.
He'll go in the kitchen.
Jordan received mercury far exceeding EPA safety guidelines. We know that mercury causes neurotoxicity. There's no controversy about that.
You're right, there's not. What the controversy is how much mercury there is in the doses of the vaccines, but please go on.
Does it cause autism? It contributes to the damages that lead to autism.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan was not born with autism. He was a normal child. He was injured by vaccinations, and the injuries led to his autism.
Certainly, this is a controversial point in the medical field because the conventional medical community has basically stated that there is no link between mercury and autism.
The science has been very clear on this. We have 6 studies that show mercury-containing vaccines don't cause autism. And although there can be slight flaws,
I
think, in any of those studies, once you have negative study after negative study after negative study, I think you can say with comfort that a truth has emerged.
Almost all vaccine studies are epidemiological studies, which means that large groups of people are compared to each other. There has been very little bench science that is looking at what happens at the molecular and cellular level in the body. We really need to do both kind of studies in order to understand what really happens.
The research is incomplete, and the certainty that's foisted on us by vaccine authorities,
the vaccine police,
is not scientific.
In July 1999, the American Academy of Pediatrics and Vaccine Manufacturers agreed that thimerosal should be reduced or eliminated in vaccines as a precautionary measure. Thimerosal. There we go.
Since 1999, the amount of mercury has been reduced in vaccinations, but thimerosal is still present in some vaccines. And it's pretty clear from the scientific evidence that any form of mercury in the body is toxic and it can cause damage.
Wow, Sleepy Doodle, that is rare. Never had a flu shot in my life, never plan on it.
Okay.
You ready to split? You ready to bust?
Yeah, it was a long day here, I know. We're still hoping that he can learn to articulate a few words because I think he's becoming aware that he can't talk.
Yeah.
I think that's finally frustrated him. Everybody around him.
Stop depressing me. I grew up with this shit.
And sometimes he'll get up in my mouth and just watch me talk and just like, how do you do that? You know, it's just.
The bottom line is there are great differences between children. We make assumptions that every child has a similar level of tolerance, which is clearly not the case.
Oh, here we go.
There's studies looking at children's hair for mercury, showing autistic children excreting much less mercury compared to other children. Clearly,
what?
There's some inability to get rid of the toxics, so
what?
They're more susceptible.
Where the research is going on this is to try to identify which children have some sort of genetic risk or some sort of predisposition to having a severe vaccine reaction.
The vaccine program, it's one size fits all. Every child is the same. Every child needs to be vaccinated regardless of their family history or their medical background.
Well, that's obviously not true. Just don't vaccinate. You need to only select for children that we somehow will know need to be vaccinated or something.
What we don't know is what is sitting in their genetics that's potentially going to express itself or not express itself for a child to develop certain chronic illnesses.
Yeah, Daniel, hold on a second. Let Forrest say his Bible verse.
What?
Do you have your Bible verse for us?
Why?
God's way is perfect. There's something about his words not being flawed in there in the second line.
My oldest child has learning disabilities, asthma, numerous food allergies.
Word of God.
My youngest son has a significant speech delay. When you look back through their medical records, they are all absolutely perfectly healthy until the day they are vaccinated.
No.
And then it is like clockwork.
You just say vaccinated as though you didn't earlier admit that there were repeat rounds of vaccinations, some starting almost at birth. So which one? What do you... No, it's an aging issue.
Every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks, we are at the doctor, runny nose, ear infection, asthma, respiratory problems.
This way.
When I vaccinated any of my children, my doctor did not give me the vaccine information safety sheets that by law you're required to give.
You had fraud perpetuated upon you, eh?
Every pediatrician should ask about adverse reactions in other children and other family members and family history. And none of that was done.
Wichita.
I talked to the doctor last night. They can't sedate you. You're going to be awake during the spinal tap.
Sick.
They have to do it.
Yep.
Seriously.
April Fool.
No.
I'm serious.
Sorry, dear. No. She's dead fucking serious. That's why she waited till you were in the car.
It's a heart attack. And I wasn't going to say nothing because
Yeah.
I didn't want you to freak out about it.
Yeah.
But
They're gonna stick a 9-inch
It's not 9 inches, but
needle
yeah.
in my back.
quit stressing
I
out.
saw Baby Mama, and they're like,
It's a movie.
Licensed to Wed, and
Gabrielle,
They're not exaggerating.
I'm telling you, those are movies. They make
No. No.
the needles huge
No.
for that purpose.
Nope.
It's not that big. It's big, but it's not that big.
they diagnosed me with vasculitis. Vasculitis is a disease that causes problems with the blood flow. It can cause me to have strokes and seizures because your oxygen levels aren't able to get from your...
Yeah, that's the problem. No one prayed over them and vaccines, and the devil got in them. Yeah, devil vaccines. Gotta have kosher vax.
brain to the rest of your body.
Kosher vax.
Dr. Lindholm, he likes to tell me, I'm not gonna let you die. He tells me that all the time. And so I'm like, okay, Dr. Lindholm.
He sounds like a charming man, to be fair.
I've been homebound for 2.5 months. It's like, I go to school at home, and sometimes I get lonely because my friends will be out doing everything or hanging out with their friends, but I think that a positive attitude has a lot to do with it. So I'm trying to stay positive.
Since the vaccine has been licensed, there have been more than 18,000 serious adverse event reports made to VAERS. What's the government's response been? tool.
Well, those are literally self-reporting. Is there a nice way to say they let you guys have a platform to vent your frustrations so they could ignore you? Is there a nice way to say that, or?
This. Their response has been to issue a report that says all of these reactions and adverse events and deaths are a coincidence.
So when a child goes for the next vaccine, there's no reason for the parent to think that the prior
This
reaction
is the
was in any
vaccine.
way related to the vaccinations. So they're going to get the vaccines again.
People can report a potential
Vax 'em up.
problem that they might have noticed to the CDC, but these reports do not in and of themselves speak to any association between a given adverse experience and a given vaccine, because lots of things could be causing the problems that are reported to the VAERS system, and have
I stopped listening to you and started listening to the soundtrack like 10 seconds ago, my dude. Sorry.
nothing to do with the vaccine.
That you got a vaccine and that then you develop symptoms doesn't necessarily mean that the vaccine caused the symptoms.
Nope.
There is
Nope. You're lying. You're lying to cover your ass. That's what's going on here.
no evidence that HPV vaccine causes any of the serious side effects that it has been alleged to cause. It's a
You're not being mean, Sleepy Doodle. She's not. She's not far off.
beautiful vaccine. It's safe, effective. It doesn't matter what people say. It really doesn't matter what people's opinions are. All you have to do is look at the data, and the data, I think, will tell you, how one should approach a problem.
And now they're going to use data. As of 2010, VAERS has received 85 reports of death after Gardasil. Yeah, it is nice to see that, Dark. I agree. Was that your advice? I couldn't remember who was it. Whoever it was, thank you for advising I do this, because it has worked brilliantly, and I haven't even had to give a shit the whole time, so.
Homecoming candidates are about ready to make an entrance.
That's the Dyke volleyball coach or something. Shit. Go back. No, go back. Let's see the Dyke volleyball coach again. It's only fair.
HPV vaccine causes any of the serious side effects that it has been alleged to cause. It's a beautiful vaccine. It's safe, effective. It doesn't matter what people say. It really doesn't matter what people's opinions are. All you have to do is look at the data, and the data, I think, will tell you, how one should approach a problem.
Here she is. Seriously, this is someone's Bull Dyke aunt.
Candidates are about ready to make an entrance. Your sophomore candidates, Gabby Swank.
Jesus Christ. You think she hits on the female students, or?
All right,
Jesus.
come out. Let's see it. Next. It's pretty. It's very pretty. That, no.
Nope,
Yeah,
nope,
I'm sorry. That's where
nope.
I draw the line. You are not wearing that. It
I feel like we're gonna get flagged for that. Jesus Christ.
makes you look short. That's not your dress.
I like it.
No.
Why don't we put wash
This is proof that you had something happen to your brain.
this soft, like loose curl, so it's not tight, kinky curls?
I love this. Thank you so much.
Gabby, you okay?
No, my back hurts so bad. Don't touch me.
Yeah, she's in the middle of a seizure.
No, I'm not.
Yes, she is. She's clenching her jaw.
Now I feel kind of nauseated. Will you tell them to get out of the bathroom for a second?
Oh, Jesus.
Pass that, Monica. I need you to get out of the bathroom.
All right.
Come on. It's all right. It's all right. I got you. Go.
My hair is all messed up
Don't worry
now.
about your hair. I'll fix your hair.
I don't need this.
Kara, it's
See, let's just take a moment and realize that every girl you've ever had complain that your place was messy, she's just as bad. All girls are like this too, so just know.
Shannon.
It's just a different kind of clutter.
Gabby's not gonna get to come. We're getting ready to go to the emergency room.
worst luck in the world.
Honey, it's okay.
All teenagers feel that way.
Everything happens for a reason. I know that doesn't make you
That's also not true.
feel better right now.
The Holocaust happened for a reason. That's your logic, dear.
Honey, but having bad luck doesn't make you feel better either.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so you have bad luck. How's that?
Yeah, because if she has bad luck, it's not her fault.
I got every stupid red light now. See, I told you I had bad luck. Honey, you don't have bad luck.
I don't want to watch a teenage girl suffer. Why did you shoot this? Whose idea was this?
No, she.
It's a teenage girl writhing in pain in a car. Thanks, I needed that.
Puking, and I just didn't want to puke in the parking lot. Sorry. We were a little shocked to find out that she had kidney stones. The Topamax that she's taking to control her seizures has led her to now have kidney stones, and they will have to go in and surgically remove.
Yes, anti-seizure medications can give you kidney stones. This is true.
When they finally got her to her room, she said she was really sad that I went from being a princess to look where I'm at now. It's amazing how things can change so quickly.
Life comes at you fast.
Brilliantly done.
Okay, where do you want next? Where should go here? What do you think? Can we just do that right there? I would say that
I mean, she's not pitch perfect, but beautifully done.
Jordan acts like your average, maybe 3 or 4 year old.
Yeah.
It's kind of like having a toddler for 11 years.
That's pretty typical.
People will email
Just wait till he's 35.
me and they'll say, it's such a blessing to have a child with autism.
Huh?
You know, we're so lucky. We learn so much from our son.
As someone who, again, worked in this community, I've always wanted to smack the fuck out of those people.
He's an angel. You know, he isn't corrupted by the world. I just want to kill those people because having a kid with autism is really hard, and it's not what the kid would have wanted for himself.
No shit.
It obviously makes you stronger and tougher, but it's not a blessing. It's pretty hard.
I actually appreciate you being honest. Thank you for that, at least.
So grateful that we're here together, and we need to unite across all of the different ways.
Almost 8 years ago, I think, we were at an autism rally, and we started talking to other people, and everybody had the same story about the mercury toxicity. And this one parent, George Mead, decided
Yeah, this is how cults form.
to go ahead with this class action, and we decided to join him in that. Jordan and William Mead were 2 of the test cases that were chosen to represent the lawsuit.
Jordan King was one of 5,600 cases in the omnibus autism proceedings that examined the link between autism and vaccines. Yes, excellent.
The first thing that we learned is you can't sue the drug company that made the vaccine. Our lawyer explained to us how there was this court set up specifically to address all the vaccine injuries.
There were a lot of civil lawsuits against vaccine manufacturers, and there were some extraordinary
Don't worry, Sleepy Doodle. We all felt that way when she first said it.
awards because there were very devastating injuries. So the vaccine manufacturer said, this isn't profitable for us. We're not going to make vaccines anymore. So Congress stepped in and said, okay, we're going to stop lawsuits against manufacturers, and you're not allowed to sue them unless you first go through this new program that we're setting up called the Vaccine Compensation Program, or the Vaccine Court.
The way the money comes into the fund is every time a vaccine is given in this country, there's a tax on it. So when you take your child in, you pay the 75-cent tax, that goes into the fund.
To date, there's been about $2 billion that has been paid out, and there's about $3 billion left.
Uh-huh. The court ... because they edited buffers ... makers of childhood disease vaccines for much of the litigation risk that dogs' traditional pill manufacturers. Vaccine
We
makers
face a
are poised to
future
generate $21
where
billion.
presumably you
Yes,
could
fantastic.
have 30, 40, 50 different vaccines recommended for universal use and mandated, and absolutely no accountability. You have a prescription for disaster when you don't have anybody accountable.
Yeah, now you're just talking shit at this point. Although I will point out that, look, there's the sword and there's the fasci. That's interesting.
In a court of law for what happens when vaccines go wrong.
It just amazes me, what the government does to protect the integrity of vaccines. It can be anything but the vaccine. They feel as though their job is to keep immunization rates up. And if you legitimize vaccine claims, then you're saying, yeah, there are vaccine injuries, and they can never say that.
Is this a conspiracy?
No. Does it raise concerns? Is it difficult? Yes, but a conspiracy? Kevin?
Yeah, I think it's a conspiracy.
At least he said no and then diverted to Kevin.
I definitely think it's a conspiracy, but this is not a conspiracy.
Oh, Global News has a story. What does a Klimp Trump presidency mean for... Oh, good.
Conspiracy to do a crime.
For
This is
women,
a
of course.
conspiracy, to do good, and the goal is to keep immunization rates up so these dreaded diseases don't come back, and that is certainly well-meaning.
Hey,
It's
mysterious
well-meaning.
gentleman. Yeah, I imagine it would.
Pharmaceuticals, but well-meaning, and certainly our government, the good people in the government, they're trying to protect society, which is their job. But you sometimes wonder, if these motivations, don't interfere with, safety issues.
Oh, here we go. We're gonna go back to some 50s video. Sweet.
Welby says, be well. Be well, be well, be well, be Welby. Urge your family, friends, and neighbors to take the new oral polio vaccine. The new oral polio...
This was wrong. We should have never done this. Polio was a beautiful disease that gave us a wonderful president.
Polio vaccine tastes good, works fast, and prevents polio. So to protect...
We're taught in medical school that vaccines reduce the incidence rate of smallpox or polio. One of the things that's missing in medical education is that they're not the only thing that play a role as to whether or not diseases come and go. Today, what I'd like to talk about is the rationale of vaccines. There was an article in Pediatrics Journal, which is the Bible journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and this article looked at child mortality rates by age at death in the United States between 1900 and 1998.
It's fantastic to draw this conclusion from that chart. I have no idea how you could get this far into this.
And you see all the death rates of these diseases actually came down before the DPT was licensed in 1949 and the measles vaccine was introduced in 1963. So what is it that actually helped? State and local health departments implemented public health measures and public education about hygienic practices.
Yeah, so it was the hygienic practices that killed these diseases, right? It wasn't by any means the vaccines.
Thus, vaccination does not account for the impressive declines in mortality seen in the first half of the century.
Obviously.
It doesn't say that vaccines don't work. It just says that there's more...
Note you said first half, and even the chart you showed before had a significant number, I believe 40% mortality rates in the 1950s, 1956. So, yeah.
Information to actually understand that vaccines may not be responsible for the things that we're taught that they are responsible for.
Fantastic.
So just another... I've had numerous conversations with physicians regarding the subject of vaccines, and it is pretty clear that we in the medical profession are devoted to helping to save lives. Unfortunately, a pediatrician will often not recognize a reaction to a vaccine because they're not taught that. It's not within the training.
I never learned in medical school how vaccines were studied, what type
That's because you're a psychiatrist. What's your point?
the clinical trials they went through, how they
This is called specialization, you derp-faced cunt.
evaluated adverse reactions, how they even evaluated effectiveness.
What exact psychiatric cocktail are you on, out of curiosity? Is this a physician heal thyself, or?
So after Victoria died, I started reading everything that is put out there. Anything that would lead me to a topic, then I would Google that topic, and if there were textbooks in relation to that topic, I would order them, and then based on reading that book, I would order another book.
Yeah, good.
What I
You totally immersed yourself in the world of anti-vax.
have learned has shocked.
Listen, I read one UFO book, and that book led me to other UFO books, and now my entire life is dedicated to UFOs.
me. There has been information out there since the smallpox vaccine was created, linking vaccinations to encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain, which can cause death or permanent neurological disability.
Yeah, there's plenty of cases of encephalitis occurring right now.
I've learned recently the placebo in a vaccine trial can actually be the aluminum or the mercury or another vaccine.
Sometimes it can be anything but the vaccine, or everything but the vaccine itself. Yes, to see if the actual vaccine itself is the problem. This isn't hard to understand.
I would assume the placebo was normal saline, which would be like water, something not harmful. In accredited, peer-reviewed medical literature, they have linked vaccinations to chronic autoimmune problems. The science
You see, you sampled that out of there, but even the rest of that headline didn't seem to fit your narrative, dear.
is out there. People are just choosing not to look at it.
There is some published research showing dangers of vaccinations. Why isn't it getting into the mainstream?
Probably because
media?
it's not impressive.
Because of fear.
No, you're probably looking at less than 1% of a fraction. That's probably why.
Centers for Disease Control says a measles outbreak has sickened more than 100 people in 15 states. Health officials say that most of the victims were not vaccinated, and they.
It's very interesting when you look at how the government wants to publicize every case of measles that happens so that people will kind of have the misconception that measles is on
What misconception?
the rise. The reality is measles has gone up a little bit.
The reality is, yes, since the anti-vax narrative, it has gone up a little bit.
We're having about 140 to 150 cases each year nowadays, whereas we used to only have about 100. I don't think it's worth the publicity that the government is giving us over it.
Well, it's good that you don't think it's worth it because it shatters your narrative. I understand that. It's not functional for you.
A total of 130.
Measles can be a very serious disease. Children often with measles will get fevers of 103, 105 degrees, ear infections.
No. Let's have a discussion about what happens if it mutates and then infects an adult.
Pneumonia, encephalitis, or brain inflammation, and even death.
Nah, that's all.
Sort of get discouraged at times. I hope we don't have to have a massive outbreak of measles
Nah, it'll never happen again. Just don't vaccinate your kids. It's fine.
to reinvigorate our immunization efforts.
This is Mitadrine, a heart medication, I'm sure. Oxycodone,
Yo, you got that good stuff, girl.
the devil's pill. Makes you feel terrible.
What? What? No, it doesn't. If you don't like them, you can mail them to me.
Methotrexate, famotidine, phenytoin sodium, prednisone, Keppra, oxycarbazepine for trileptal,
You're on all the medications.
hydroxychloroquine. Quine.
She's taking almost 40 pills a day
Sweet.
now.
You must have good insurance.
I thought it was 30.
No, we increased, remember?
No.
We increased the Keppra and we increased the trileptal, both. We are probably spending almost $2,000 a month, and that's with our insurance. And it doesn't seem like it's getting, any better. She's starting to complain of chest pains and blood pressure problems, and the seizures are uncontrollable now.
She should already be dead.
you know, we just
Have you considered the alternative, dear?
focus on today.
Gonna give you a little bad news ASMR here. See, without all this, she might already be dead.
And pray for tomorrow. I actually haven't been here since we left.
What'd you do? Hassle a landlord to get left back in?
Being here just reminds me of how much we've had to give up.
Fuck me, how much longer is this? Really? How
This
is there
was
still
our
20
house,
minutes, you
regardless
bitch?
of whether or not it was great or, you know, wonderful. This was home. We were forced to choose between the house and the repairs and Gabby's medical bills and her medicines and we probably are sitting at probably close to 100,000 in unpaid medical bills. Financially, we've just become ruined.
Oh, well, I thought you guys must have had good insurance for them to bother giving you all those pills.
Derek and I are getting a divorce. And, you know, like most families and our marriages, I mean, we had problems prior to Gabby getting sick. But the last 2 years of our lives has put so much more added stress on our marriage that he can't do it anymore.
Oh, so it's ruined your marriage too.
He said he was sorry, but he just can't. He can't do it.
Since the licensure of Gardasil, it has become one of the most widely used
They're heavily focused on Gardasil, aren't they?
vaccines in the United States, and the Food and Drug Administration and the
Yeah, okay, they're going into a different argument here. Mhm.
Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are recommending the use of that vaccine.
Okay, now he's whispering. Now, okay, I made a joke, but now he's legitimately talking like this into the microphone.
For all females between the ages of 11 and 26, with the opportunity to reach 9-year-old females if that is felt to be recommended by that individual's physician.
In 2009, the FDA approved Gardasil for use in boys aged 9 to 26, and none of them get them. I've never known a guy to get this at all. I'm sure it's approved.
What if these
but-
shots that are supposed to protect kids against disease actually hurt your child? Joining me, Barbara Lowe Fisher.
I do not do as much media as I did in the 1980s and 1990s. I think there's been a concerted effort in the last
Yeah, we're getting divorced because my husband thinks I've lost my mind. Yeah, pretty much.
decade to demonize advocates like myself.
Anti-vaccination bullshit.
FYI, even Penn Jillette here will tell you straight out, these guys pushed the hardest. They are the angriest of all the groups they've ever done a bullshit on.
In the 21st century, it has been much harder to get the other side of the vaccine story out by a media that's increasingly only covering one side of it.
Tonight on Frontline, Frontline reports on the science and politics of the bitter vaccine war.
I spent half a day with a reporter who I felt was well-meaning from Frontline. We gave a long interview. 3 of my prestigious
Yeah, and it didn't go well for you.
colleagues, academics, scientists, also gave interviews discussing our concerns about vaccinations. Not a word of any of our interviews appeared in the PBS Frontline story. Instead of a scientific discussion presenting the facts, hysterical moms are presented against white coat, Ivy League academics. I'm sick and tired of this.
Well, then stop inspiring mobs of irrational, angry moms. Just a thought.
I see children injured every day, disasters in families from vaccination injuries.
I can't even watch them anymore, really, as anything other than kind of a PR machine. I wish that they would
What did you
stop
ever
saying
think
that we're
they were, my dear?
anti-vaccine. I think that that's just a way of labeling.
What are you talking about? You are anti-vaccine. There are signs there that say vaccines are not. I mean, what one size fits all. These are anti-vaccine.
us that makes it easy for people to dismiss us. The shows
Mommy, don't let them shoot me. I mean, what else do you need when you're talking about emotive signature here?
are all about, do you vaccinate or not? There's no middle ground. There's no thoughtful, let's rethink how we do this. You know, it's like black and white. Either we have to do it the way we've been doing it, or you don't do it at all.
A landmark court ruling doesn't mince words. Vaccines do not cause autism. The theory of vaccine-related causation, the court ruled, is scientifically unsupportable. This is a case in which the evidence is so...
It was a case unlike any other. It was very, very public.
Yes. You guys kind of made it public.
And the news media was very much involved. And
yes, the parents very much got the news media involved.
Because of all the publicity, the fear on behalf of the government was great that vaccines were going to be considered unsafe.
The government's lawyers were treating our whole side as if we ignore science and we were not rational people. But the only people I know of who have received awards left the word autism out of the equation. Anything but the A word.
Anything but the thing we can't prove.
Somehow this autism vaccine thing became so political and so
How are you pretending this is political?
you know, explosive. I just want everybody to lay down their arms and let's figure out what is making them so sick.
Can you explain to me the cases of late onset autism that occur in places that don't have vaccines at all? I'll wait.
Autism has been interesting in that it's been a tale of shifting hypotheses. In the late 1990s was born the notion that MMR vaccine caused autism. Then a few years later, that hypothesis kind of morphed to it's thimerosal, this ethyl mercury-containing preservative in vaccines.
Of course.
Now we're kind of at hypothesis 3, the notion that children are just receiving too many vaccines too soon. All those contentions, I think, have been clearly disproved by scientific studies. Yet still the media carries the story because they're interesting, not because they're right.
In the last decade, the conversation has shifted from one looking at the broad issue.
In the last decade, the conversation about creationism has shifted from this broad religious perspective to being more of this God of the gaps and then intelligent design and oh wait.
Issues concerned with vaccine safety and vaccine policies to focusing on autism. And I believe it was an error that has had serious consequences.
That lady just said that.
The truth is,
She's the one doing what you're saying is wrong.
it's become very easy to dismiss the entire vaccine safety issue by focusing on autism and vaccines.
The debate is not over, and the need remains to
This
evaluate
sounds like
all
it's
the
wrapping up,
components of
ladies and gentlemen.
vaccines and their safety.
We
or
can
lack
only
of
hope,
safety.
and we can only hope the next one's less painful.
Our children today have elevated levels of many neurotoxins in their blood. Plastics derivatives, petrochemicals.
It's almost like you're focusing on the wrong issue. It's almost like a poison environment might be more of a problem.
Pesticides, PCBs. Our tanks are nearly full. Our capacity to detoxify all these substances is very limited.
For sure, there are certainly thousands of molecules, mostly man-made, that have been introduced into the environment over the years. And many of these have the potential to be neurotoxic.
So obviously the problem is that autism is caused by vaccines.
The idea that we live in a toxic soup and that vaccines add to that toxic soup, I think, is a very valid concept. But the research hasn't been done.
If I remember correctly, even this, someone who was involved in this documentary tried to sue them because he basically was taken out of context. I don't know who it was. I wish I'd made note of it.
Jack, I'm going to take your shoes off. Is that okay?
Is that okay?
When I trained in the 1980s, one of the things that my mentors taught me was always listen to the mother. The mother knows the child. And I see a lot of children whose parents come to me knowing that the child was damaged by vaccines. Now, that's anecdotal.
Yes, the child was damaged by vaccines. Now, that's anecdotal.
There's no study there. And so we need to do a proper scientific study.
Yes.
Comparing the health outcomes of children who are vaccinated to health outcomes of children who are not vaccinated.
We can do that. And in the third world, they die in droves. If you'd like, we can easily do that. We can pull those numbers.
Until we have that placebo-controlled unvaccinated group compared to a large vaccinated group, there's always going to be doubt in parents' minds.
It seems like we ought to be able to do that. But the fact of the matter is, it would be pretty hard to find those 50,000 unvaccinated children to do the study.
Where should we be putting our healthcare dollars?
Uh-huh.
We have a number of infectious diseases that are still a plague, if you will, on our society. Perhaps we should put those dollars in developing the next generation vaccines.
Absolutely not. No more vaccines. The buck stops here.
I'm Barbara Lowe Fisher, and I want to welcome you to the 4th International Public Conference on Vaccination. The theme of this conference is Show Us the Science and Give Us the Choice.
Well, we have, but if we give you the choice to do things, we've seen sometimes how this works out. You can't always trust the plebs.
She told me yesterday to start taking her off the meds. She said, I'm dying, and I know that, and these aren't helping, and we can't afford it. So, Mom, just take me off the medicine and let me die. That's awful.
Uh-huh.
I would like to introduce you to a very special mom. Shannon has come here from Kansas. We had wanted Gabrielle to come. Gabrielle is too sick to come, but Gabrielle wanted to
Gabrielle, I'm speaking on behalf of, was too sick to come.
create
I'll use her illness to push this.
a statement, a video.
About 2 years ago, Gardasil, the vaccine, completely changed my life. I can't drive, and I've been looking forward to it since I was 12. And I can't go to the bowling alley like all my friends do because of the strobe lights, because of the seizures. I would do
It's almost like you have epilepsy.
anything to get my life back to normal. I
Why are you doing this to your daughter?
don't like being that girl that everybody's like, oh, she can't go to do this or she can't go do this because she's sick. It's just changed my life in so many ways. And I don't want any other girl have to go through this.
That is our story. I'm not a doctor.
Yeah, we know.
I'm not a scientist.
We're well aware.
I'm a mother.
I'm a mother.
I was not given the information that I needed to make an informed choice for her. The message I leave here with anything
Yes, you were. You could have looked it up. You chose not to.
today is
You were as taken by the advertising as, well, I don't know, your daughter.
make sure that you are educated or you educate those around you. Thank you very much. I would rather my daughter got cervical cancer.
Sick.
Go through now.
Good.
It's not worth it.
Yeah. That's just a great statement to make. I mean, there's a lot of things you could have said here, and that was the one that you went with.
I truly like your sign that says, show us the science and give us the choice, because what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is show you the science.
Oh, this ought to be good.
I'm going to try.
Oh, we're not going to see that
We
part, are we?
certainly need to change the way our system is. Our system is not working well now. I think it's entirely plausible.
The system
that
is broken.
We can have the information, we can design the databases, we can design the long-term follow-up, but it becomes a matter of political priority and a matter of financial priority.
Ooh. Ooh, they picked up the lapping water too good. Yikes.
Yes.
Your son.
Oh yeah, good. Let's go to the grave. Sweet. This is how you end a
chose this
film.
site,
You just
and it's a
bam,
beautiful
punch
setting.
him right in the face. This is good.
Victoria is laid to rest right above Mama Joe.
I never got to see her.
That's Victoria.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I feel at this point betrayed
by our medical system.
Of course.
They do not even acknowledge that there is a problem.
No.
And if they do not acknowledge something, they cannot change it.
We'll put some water in there, that's right. Then Forrest will put the flowers in.
There's no doubt in our mind that had we not vaccinated our daughter, she would be here today. And I believe that from the bottom of my heart.
Well, I mean, you believe in all sorts of stuff, if I recall correctly. So that doesn't exactly shock me.
We're not zealots. We're not some people that are looking for a conspiracy or a fight around every corner. But you can no longer ignore these statistics.
Obviously.
It's beyond me to think why all these vaccines are necessary. I understand where they started from, and I think a lot of good has been done initially. But I think it's really time for us to relook at the policy and what we're putting in these children.
Why is it always the religious nuts that are conspiracy nuts as well? Oh no.
Overall, the one feeling I have is a low-level, constant anxiety. You have to constantly monitor what other people think about what's going on.
No.
Sometimes I almost want to wear a T-shirt saying, "I have autism." I can't.
Yeah, again, to most people at this point in our world, we can pretty much just take one gander at that and go, mm-hmm.
Talk or something like that.
Jordan, we're gonna do something about this.
There have been several instances here in Portland with autistic teenagers and adults getting tasered by police. The police will yell at you to stop.
What?
Or turn
What?
around.
What?
Because you're.
How did it end up here? How are we here? Now we're to the government enforcement angle? Really? How are we here?
You're acting weird so that they think you're on drugs. We're not spring chickens. He's obviously going to outlive us.
Yeah, like I said, just wait till he's 35.
We're hoping that by the time he's an adult, there's some kind of group home that evolves.
What do you mean some kind? They already exist. This isn't a new thing, ma'am. I've worked in them.
Because those kids are coming down the pike.
What do you mean? It exists. This isn't new.
About 10 years from now, you know, there's going to be a lot of autistic people out there.
I think you may be expanding those numbers and what exactly that means. Your spectrum here is not always that. You must know this. You must know that just because someone's been labeled autistic doesn't mean they're profoundly autistic, right? You have to know this.
Walk in the streets.
You fucking have to know this. Hi, Cinnamon.
I just want to let you know that what we're going to do is send one message up there, and that is that we want the safety mechanism separated out from the same people who are doing policy making. So you don't want the fox guarding the chicken coop. Congress
Awesome.
should be providing strong oversight on vaccine development, policy making, and regulation in this country, and they're not. Until we have money that is committed to independent research by investigators who do not have ideological or financial conflicts of interest with either government or industry, we're not going to get the kind of science we need.
We're not going to get the kind of science we need. Okay. That's a statement.
It's absolutely essential that we find out, before we add one more vaccine to the mandatory vaccination schedule, whether or not these vaccines are safe.
Is that it? Are we done? Woohoo! We fucking made it. Good. Next. Okay, next is going to be a short documentary, a little bit over an hour, probably runtime of an hour and 8, but a total of an hour and 15, that is going to be about how climate change doesn't. I'm going to unreverse the picture and gamble, if no one cares. I think it's a good idea. I think this one is not particularly owned, as it were, so I'm a bit less concerned about it. Yes, the flag is still there. There we go. And we will commence. Good. Good. So far, this has really started off well. I'm liking the intro, really.
We imagine that we live in an age of reason. And the global warming alarm is dressed up as science, but it's not science.
Yeah, it's just dressed up as science. It's complete bollocks.
It's propaganda.
There's no direct evidence which links 20th century global warming to anthropogenic greenhouse gases.
We're just
No, of course not.
being told lies. That's what it comes down to.
Mhm.
We can't say that CO2 will drive climate. It certainly never did in the past.
What? And it's not just CO2. CO2 is a contributing factor. Are you already introing with complete bollocks?
CO2 increases in the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas, then the temperature will go up. But the ice core record shows exactly the opposite. So the fundamental assumption, the most fundamental assumption of the whole theory of climate change due to humans
Uh-huh.
is shown to be wrong.
No.
The whole thing stinks.
I tend not to take the advice of people that are approaching it in that manner.
Man-made global warming is no longer just a theory about climate. It is the defining moral and political cause of our age.
Oh, good. That's one way to define it.
Campaigners say the time for debate is over. Any criticism, no matter how scientifically rigorous, is illegitimate. Even worse...
Oh, they're going to do the same thing. Okay, there we go. See, yeah, we're going to do the same thing here as we did in the last thing, only in reverse. Good, excellent.
Dangerous. But in this film, it will be shown that the Earth's climate is always changing.
Fantastic hypothesis, really. I'm impressed. I'm deeply, deeply impressed.
That there is nothing unusual about the current temperature, and that the scientific evidence does not support the notion that climate is driven by carbon dioxide.
No, not at all. It's not even influenced by carbon dioxide.
Man-made or otherwise.
Nope.
Everywhere you are told that man-made climate change is proved beyond doubt. But you are being told lies.
A lie. This one has a better soundtrack and editing, really. I mean, it's more 20th century, to be fair. And I actually think it's older. This is from like 2009 or something, and it comes off as more modern.
When people say we don't believe in global warming, I say, no, I believe in global warming. I don't believe that human CO2 is causing that warming.
A few years ago, if you would...
Okay, fine. And then I don't care. Do you have any solutions at all? Because if not, you're not going to help anything.
ask me, I will tell you.
I also tend not to listen to anyone who's come out of the University of Jerusalem on anything but medical stuff.
CO2. Why? Because just like everyone else in the public, I listen to what the media had to say.
Each day, the news reports grow more fantastically apocalyptic. Politicians no longer...
Yes, I agree that there are people that have obviously exaggerated climate change, and I think that the stupid what's-his-name documentary that started this whole controversy was the mistake. The origin mistake. However...
dare to express any doubt about climate change.
There is such intolerance of any dissenting voice.
Are some of the worst climate criminals on the planet.
This
See that kind of language we can do without.
is the most politically incorrect thing possible, is to doubt this climate change orthodoxy.
Global warming has gone beyond politics. It is a new kind of morality.
Of course, and by that you mean religion. By morality you mean religion, right?
Repentant and unembarrassed about yet another long-haul destination.
Yet, as the frenzy over man-made global warming grows shriller, many senior climate scientists say the actual scientific basis for the theory is crumbling.
There were periods, for example, in Earth's history when we had 3 times as much CO2 as we have today, or periods when we had 10 times as much CO2 as we have today. And if CO2 has a large effect on climate, then you should see it in the temperature reconstruction.
Yes, and the sun was a little bit cooler. We were a little bit further. I mean, what are we doing here? There are many variables involved in that. Not to mention, I believe this is the part where when I was doing research, they said he's flat lying. They say the CO2 is released by, I believe, volcanoes.
If we look at climate through the geological time frame, we would never suspect CO2 as a major climate driver.
None of the major climate changes in the last 1,000 years can be explained by CO2.
We can't say that CO2 will drive climate. It certainly never did in the past.
You guys say that, it makes it
I've
feel
often heard it
scripted.
said
This
that
has
there's
been
a
said
consensus
several
of
times
thousands
now.
of scientists on the global warming issue, and that humans are causing a catastrophic change to the climate system.
Uh-huh.
Well, I am one scientist, and there are many that simply think that is not true.
Man-made global warming is no ordinary
Is this documentary aged to the point where they're still using global warming?
scientific theory.
This morning, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, made up of...
It is presented in the media as having the stamp of authority of an impressive international organization.
From the IPCC,
The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
Yes, if the entire ice caps melted, I think the sea level would rise something like 10 feet. It wouldn't be catastrophic.
Or IPCC.
The IPCC, like any UN body, is political. The final conclusions are politically driven.
This claim
Are they trying to
that the
genocide us? Is that what this
IPCC is the world's top 1,500 or 2,500 scientists. You look at the bibliographies of the people and it's simply not true. There
are also tons of other sources, but do go on.
Quite a number of non-scientists.
And to build the number up to 2,500, they have to start taking reviewers and government people and so on, anyone who ever came close to them. And none of them are asked to agree.
I'm actually prepared for the concept that we have to deal with it. That there's no stopping it. The guy I work with, who also does the Trade Center physics, basically argues that even the people who are arguing you need to get down to 350 parts per million are laughable, because if we're not down to 290, then it won't go backwards. We're just going to sustain the slight increase.
Many of them disagree.
Those people who are specialists but don't agree with the polemic and resign, and there have been a number that I know of, they are simply put on the author list and become part of this 2,500 of the world's top scientists.
People have decided you have to convince other people that since no scientist disagrees, you shouldn't disagree either. But that, whenever you hear that in science, that's pure propaganda.
Yeah, let's start talking about the Holocaust.
This is the story of how a theory about climate turned into a political ideology.
See, I don't even like to call it the environmental movement anymore, because really it is a political activist movement, and they have become hugely influential at a global level.
It is the story of the distortion of a whole area of science.
Climate scientists need there to be a problem in order to get funding.
We have a vested interest in creating panic, because then money will flow to climate science.
There's one thing you shouldn't say, and that is, this might not be a problem.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
It is the story of how a political
Everything's fine here.
campaign turned into a bureaucratic bandwagon.
Fact of the matter is that tens of thousands of jobs depend upon global warming right now.
What?
It's a big business.
It's become a great industry in itself. And if the whole global warming farrago collapsed, there'd be an awful lot of people out of jobs and looking for work.
This is a story of censorship
Oh my god, fantastic.
and intimidation.
It's the climate change industrial complex, is that what we're saying?
I have seen and heard their spitting fury at anybody who might.
Oh, there is Dullahan. It's the exact thing I've been saying before. They're talking about returning to primitivism. Simply, the entire West, the West has to forcibly dismantle the developing countries and then dismantle itself. It's kind of like what communists always believe about the totalitarian government that will equalize everyone and then dismantle itself. Yeah, it's delusional.
Disagree with them, which is not the scientific way.
It is a story about Westerners invoking the threat of climatic disaster to hinder vital industrial progress in the developing world.
One clear thing that emerges from the whole environmental debate is the point that there's somebody keen to kill the African dream, and the African dream is to develop.
Yes!
The environmental
Climate change is made up to kill Africa.
Movement has evolved into the strongest force there is for preventing development in the developing countries.
Oh my god, that's their actual argument.
The global warming story is a cautionary tale of how a media scare became the defining idea of a generation.
Oh my fucking god, this is gonna hurt.
The whole global warming business has become like a religion. And people who disagree are called heretics. I'm a heretic.
Heretic!
The makers of this program are all heretics.
Burn the witches! It's all a lie.
In 2005, a House of Lords inquiry was set up to examine the scientific evidence of man-made global warming. A leading figure in that inquiry was Lord Lawson of Blaby, who,
Lord Lawson of Blaby,
as Chancellor of the Exchequer in the 1980s, was the first politician to commit government money to global warming research.
This, of course, was a mistake.
We had a very, very thorough inquiry, took evidence from a whole lot of people expert in this area and produced a report. What surprised me was to discover how weak and uncertain the science was. In fact, there are more and more thoughtful people, some of them a little bit frightened to come out in the open, but who quietly, privately, and some of them publicly, are saying, hang on, wait a minute, this simply doesn't add up.
Are we going to get to meet any of these people, or...?
We are told that the Earth's climate is changing. But the Earth...
Factually inaccurate. That's why the monsoon season has stayed so steady in India right now, right?
Earth's climate is always changing. In Earth's long history, there have been countless periods when it was much warmer and much cooler than it is today.
Congratulations.
When much of the world was covered by tropical...
It's the same narrator as the Brexit movie, is it really?
...forests, or else vast ice sheets. The climate has always changed, and changed without any help from us humans.
Fantastic.
We can trace the present warming trend back at least 200 years, to the end of a very cold period in Earth's history. This cold spell is known to climatologists as the Little Ice Age.
It's actually why a certain class of wood instrument is valued, because it's made from wood that grew during that little ice age, and the wood is particularly dense and resonates particularly well.
Snow, let it snow, let it snow. It doesn't show signs of stop.
In the 14th century, Europe plunged into the Little Ice Age. And where we would look for evidence of this are the old illustrations and prints and pictures of Old Father Thames. Because during the hard...
I mean, I would like to think you have better evidence than that, right?
And toughest winters.
I mean, you have better evidence than just paintings and people complaining that it was a hard winter, right? I mean, that little dip you just showed me isn't based on
Little Ice Age, the Thames would freeze over. And there were wonderful ice fairs held on the Thames, skating and people actually selling things on the ice.
If we look back further in time, before the Little Ice Age, we find a balmy golden era, when temperatures were higher than they are today, a time known to climatologists as the medieval warm period.
It's important that people know that climate enabled a quite different lifestyle in the medieval period. We have this view today that warming is going to have apocalyptic outcomes.
Well, it can, if it's continuous.
In fact, wherever you describe this warm period...
Would you like to have a discussion about how it will be to live in the equator region, or...?
It appears to be associated with riches.
We're having a heat wave.
In Europe, this was the great age of the cathedral builders, a time when, according to Chaucer, vineyards flourished even in the north of England.
All over the city of London, there are little memories of the vineyards that grew in the medieval warm period. So this was a wonderfully rich time. And this little church, in a sense, symbolizes it, because it comes from a period of great wealth.
Going
Okay.
back in time further still, before the medieval warm period.
So he's saying that warm periods are just associated with wealth? Is that the argument? That we should just look forward to this? What is your...
We find more warm spells, including a very prolonged period during the Bronze Age, known to geologists as the Holocene Maximum, when temperatures were significantly higher than they are now for more than 3 millennia.
If we go back 8,000 years in the Holocene period, our current interglacial, it was much warmer than it is today. Now the polar bears
Good God.
obviously survived that period. They're with us today. They are very adaptable, and these warm periods in the past, what we call hypsithermals, pose no problem for them.
Climate variation in the past is clearly natural. So why do we think it's any different today?
How many of my streams were struck down? Probably all of them by now. I'd be surprised if any of them have survived.
In the current alarm about global warming, the culprit is industrial society.
Of course, and it's a dead lie.
Thanks to modern industry, luxuries once enjoyed exclusively by the rich are now available in abundance to ordinary people. Novel technologies have made life easier and richer. Modern transport and communications have made the world seem less foreign and distant. Industrial progress has changed our lives. But has it also changed the climate? According to the theory of man-made global warming, industrial growth should cause the temperature to rise. But does it?
No, absolutely not. That's clearly a myth that's been perpetuated to tear down industrial cultures, right? Especially those that are forming right now.
Anyone who goes around and says that carbon dioxide is responsible for most of the warming of the 20th century hasn't looked at the basic numbers.
Industrial production in the early decades of the 20th century was still in its infancy, restricted to only a few countries, handicapped by war and economic depression. After the Second World War, things changed. Consumer goods like refrigerators and washing machines and TVs and
I hate documentaries presented like this more than I've hated almost anything we've seen so far.
cars began to be mass-produced for an international market.
They use old footage, a guy talking over them, and just like reads history really fast and then makes linkages that aren't there. They're really
Historians
obnoxious.
call this global explosion of industrial activity the post-war economic boom.
Sleepy Doodle, can you blame him?
So how does the industrial story compare with the temperature record?
It doesn't.
Since the mid-19th century, the Earth's temperature has risen by just over 0.5 degrees Celsius. But this warming began long before cars and planes were even invented.
And this is linked to CO2 how? Are you trying to say that cars and planes are the main producers of CO2? Because now you're just talking shit.
What's more, most of the rise in temperature occurred before 1940, during a period when industrial production was relatively insignificant. After the Second World War, during the post-war economic boom, temperatures, in theory, should have shot up.
No.
But they didn't. They fell. Not for 1 or 2 years, but for 4 decades. In fact, paradoxically, it wasn't until the world economic recession in the 1970s that...
Yeah, so it's actually, industry actually warms the world. What we need to do is create more CO2 to help cool it, right?
They stopped falling.
No, I've heard this argument. This is literally that the CO2 we produced during that era cooled the Earth. It's cool.
CO2 began to increase exponentially in about 1940, but the temperature actually began to decrease 1940, continued till about 1975. So this is the opposite relation. When the CO2 is increasing rapidly, but yet the temperature decreasing, then we cannot say that CO2 and the temperature go together.
Temperature went up significantly up to 1940, when human production of CO2 was relatively low. And then in the post-war years, when industry and the whole economies of the world really got going.
What are you talking about? You're telling me production was down during a war?
And human production of CO2 just soared. The global temperature was going down. In other words, the facts didn't fit the theory.
Just at a time when, after the Second World War, industry was booming, carbon dioxide was increasing, and yet the Earth was getting cooler and starting off scares of a coming ice age. It made absolutely no sense. It still doesn't make sense.
Again, I've explained one theory for that.
Do we suppose that carbon dioxide is responsible for our changing climate? CO2 forms only a very small part of the Earth's atmosphere. In fact, we measure changes in the level of atmospheric CO2 in tens of parts per million.
Yes.
If you take CO2 as a percentage of all the gases in the atmosphere, the oxygen, the nitrogen, and argon, and so on, it's 0.054%. It's an incredibly small portion. And then, of course, you've got to take that portion that supposedly humans are adding, which is the focus.
Supposedly.
Focus of all the concern, and it gets even smaller.
Although CO2 is a greenhouse gas, greenhouse gases themselves only form a small part of the atmosphere. What's more, CO2 is a...
What is that? How is this relevant?
...relatively minor greenhouse gas.
The atmosphere is made up of a multitude of gases. A small percentage of them we call greenhouse gases.
Yeah, we get it. It's a small percent. But what are you trying to hammer home here? We shouldn't be worried about it till it's a huge percent? At what percentage do we begin to become concerned?
And of that very small percentage of greenhouse gases, 95% of it is water vapor. It's the most important greenhouse gas.
Water vapor is a greenhouse gas, by far the most important greenhouse gas.
So is there any way of checking whether the recent warming
I'd love to know what he was saying besides that.
was due
That was a real quick clip.
to an increase in greenhouse gas?
It's too much water vapor.
There is only one way to tell, and that is to look up in the sky, or a part of the sky known to scientists as the troposphere.
If it's greenhouse warming, you get more warming in the middle of the troposphere, the first 10, 12 kilometers of the atmosphere, than you do at the surface. There are good theoretical reasons for that, having to do with how the greenhouse works.
The greenhouse effect works like this. The sun
Oh
sends
god, more fucking shit animations. Why? Why are they always like this?
its heat
Why are they always pretending like they're presenting this to children?
down to Earth. If it weren't for greenhouse gases, this solar radiation would bounce back into space, leaving the planet cold and uninhabitable. Greenhouse gas traps the escaping heat in the Earth's troposphere, a few miles above the surface. And it's here, according to the climate models, that the rate of warming should be highest, if it's greenhouse gas that's causing it.
I don't think that's even what they say.
All the models, every one of them, calculates that the warming should be faster as you go up from the surface into the atmosphere. And in fact, the maximum warming over the equator should take place at an altitude of about 10 kilometers.
I have never heard of that model.
A scientist largely responsible for measuring the temperature in the Earth's atmosphere is Professor John Christie. In 1991, he was awarded NASA's Medal for Exceptional Scientific Achievement, and in 1996 received a special award from the American Meteorological Society for fundamentally advancing our ability to monitor climate. He was a lead author on the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC.
I hate when you list credentials, but go on. This was teaching material at your school. Good.
There are
Excellent.
two ways to take the temperature in the Earth's atmosphere: satellites and weather balloons.
What we found consistently is that in a great part of the planet, that the bulk of the atmosphere is not warming as much as we see at the surface in this region. And that's a real head scratcher for us, because the theory is pretty straightforward. And the theory says that if the surface warms, the upper atmosphere should warm rapidly. The rise in temperature of that part of the atmosphere is not very dramatic at all. and really does not match the theory that climate models are expressing at this point.
I've never heard that high troposphere model, but
one of the problems that is plaguing the models is that they predict that as you go up through the atmosphere, except in the polar regions, that the rate of warming increases. And it's quite clear from two data sets, not just satellite data, which everybody talks about, but from weather balloon data, that you don't see that effect. In fact, it looks like the surface temperatures are warming slightly more than the upper air temperatures. That's a big difference.
That data gives you a handle on the fact that what you're seeing is warming that probably is not due to greenhouse gases.
That is, the observations do not show an increase with altitude. In fact, most observations show a slight decrease in the rate of warming with altitude. So in a sense, you can say that the hypothesis of man-made global warming is falsified by the evidence.
in a way you could say that the heating chart didn't take into account heat loss in the upper atmosphere.
So the recent warming of the Earth happened in the wrong place and at the wrong time. Most of the warming took place in the early part of the 20th century and occurred mostly at the Earth's surface, the very opposite of what should have happened according to the theory of man-made global warming.
I am Al Gore. I used to be the next president
And here is what they are battling.
of the United States of America.
Former Vice President Al Gore's emotional film,
This is really what they're banging on about.
An Inconvenient Truth, is regarded by many as the definitive popular
No, it's not.
presentation of the
No.
theory of man-made global warming.
Yeah, pretty much no.
His argument rests on one all-important piece of evidence taken from ice core surveys in which scientists drilled deep into the ice to look back into Earth's climate history hundreds of thousands of years. The first ice core survey took place in Vostok in the Antarctic. What it found, as Al Gore correctly points out, was a clear correlation between carbon dioxide and temperature.
We're going back in time now, 650,000 years. Here's what the temperature has been on our Earth.
Oh, God.
Now, one thing that kind of jumps out at you is, do they ever fit together? Most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. The relationship is actually very
Oh, God.
complicated, but there is one relationship that is far more powerful than all the others, and it is this. When there is more carbon dioxide, the temperature gets warmer.
Al Gore says the relationship between temperature and CO2 is complicated, but he doesn't say what those complications are. In fact, there was something very important in the ice core data that he failed to mention.
And this is the thing that started this documentary, from what I know.
Professor Ian Clark is a leading Arctic paleoclimatologist who looks back into the Earth's temperature record tens of millions of years.
And this is him petting a rock.
When we look at climate on long scales, we're looking for geological material that actually records climate. If we're to take an ice sample, for example, we use isotopes to reconstruct temperature, but the atmosphere that's imprisoned in that ice, we liberate, and then we look at the CO2 content.
Professor Clark and others have indeed discovered, as Al Gore says, a link between carbon dioxide and temperature. But what Al Gore doesn't say is that the link is the wrong way round.
So here we're looking at the ice core
So it's the other way around. It's not that CO2 causes raising of temperatures, it's that raised temperatures cause CO2.
record from Vostok. And in the red, we see temperature going up from early time to later time at a very key interval when we came out of a glaciation. And we see the temperature going up, and then we see the CO2 coming up. CO2 lags behind that increase. It's got an 800-year lag. So temperature is leading CO2 by 800 years.
There have now been several major ice core surveys. Every one of them shows the same thing. The temperature rises or falls, and then, after a few hundred years,
Yes, listener, they were,
carbon dioxide
to be fair.
follows.
So obviously, carbon dioxide is not the cause of that warming. In fact, we can say that the warming produced the increase in carbon dioxide.
CO2 clearly cannot be causing temperature changes. It's a product of temperature. It's following temperature changes.
the ice core record goes to the very heart of the problem we have here. They said, if the CO2 increases in the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas, then the temperature will go up. But the ice core record shows exactly the opposite. So the fundamental
The temperature releases the CO2.
assumption, the most fundamental assumption of the whole theory of climate change due to humans is shown to be wrong.
But how can it be that higher temperatures lead to more CO2 in the atmosphere? To understand this, we must first restate the obvious point that carbon dioxide is a natural gas produced by all living things.
All living
Few
things.
things annoy me more than to hear people talking about carbon dioxide as being a pollutant. You're made of carbon dioxide. I'm made of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is how living things grow.
What's more, humans are not the main source of carbon dioxide.
Humans produce a small
Seems good.
fraction in the single digits percentage-wise of the CO2 that is produced in the atmosphere.
Volcanoes produce more CO2 each year than
And this is the one that is known to just be false. This is the data they're using that's just flatly false.
all the factories and cars and planes and other sources of man-made carbon dioxide put together. More still comes from animals and bacteria, which produce about 150 gigatons of CO2 each year, compared to a mere 6.5 gigatons from humans. And even
No, not from humans, from human production, right?
a larger source of CO2 is dying vegetation, from falling leaves, for example, in the autumn. But the biggest source of CO2 by far is the oceans. Carl Wunsch is Professor of Oceanography at MIT. He was also visiting Professor in Oceanography at Harvard University and University College London, and a Senior Visiting Fellow in Mathematics and Physics at the University of Cambridge.
He has impressive credentials. Now listen to what he has to say.
He is the author of 4 major textbooks on oceanography.
The ocean is the major reservoir into which carbon dioxide goes when it comes out of the atmosphere, or from which it is re-emitted to the atmosphere. If you heat the surface of the ocean, it tends to emit carbon dioxide.
It tends to emit carbon dioxide.
So similarly, if you cool the ocean surface, the ocean can dissolve more carbon dioxide.
So the warmer the oceans, the more carbon dioxide they produce, and the cooler they are, the more they suck in. But why is there a time lag of hundreds of years between a change in temperature and a change in the amount of carbon dioxide going into or out of the sea?
I'm sure you'll explain it to us concisely.
The reason is that oceans are so big and so deep, they take literally hundreds of years to warm up and cool down. This time lag means the oceans have...
It's funny they should say this because we can currently measure shifts in ocean temperature over the last decade, so...
have what scientists call a memory of temperature changes.
The ocean has a memory of past events running out as far as 10,000 years.
I'm glad to know that you just... what does that even mean?
So, for example, if somebody says, oh, I'm seeing changes in the North Atlantic, this must mean that the climate system is changing. It may only mean that something happened in a remote part of the ocean decades or hundreds of years ago, whose effects are now beginning to show up in the North Atlantic.
Well, I mean, that's as good an explanation as any, I suppose. Back to regular business as usual.
The current warming began long before people had cars or electric lights. In the past 150 years, the temperature has
yeah, but not before we started burning huge amounts of coal.
Risen just over 0.5 degrees Celsius. But most of that rise occurred before 1940. Since that time, the temperature has fallen for 4 decades and risen for 3. There is no evidence at all from Earth's long climate history that carbon dioxide has ever determined global temperatures. But if CO2 doesn't drive Earth's climate, what does?
And this is part 2, I guess? I guess that's why they titled, and then there's going to be a cut, and then yeah, okay. So I guess this was like originally on the BBC?
The common belief that carbon dioxide is driving climate change is at odds with much of the available scientific data. Data from weather balloons and satellites, from ice core surveys, and from the historical temperature records. But if CO2 isn't driving climate, what is?
Let's find out.
Isn't it bizarre to think that it's humans, you know, when we're filling up our car, turning on our lights, that we're the ones controlling climate? Just look in the sky. Look at that massive thing, the sun. Even humans at our present 6.5
Jesus Christ, it's the blame the sun people.
Minute.
They're claiming to have a religion and these people are sun worshipping.
In the late 1980s, solar physicist Piers Corbyn decided to try a radically new way of forecasting the weather. Despite the huge resources of the official Met Office, Corbyn's new technique consistently produced more accurate results. He was hailed in the national press as a super weatherman. The secret of his success was the sun.
The origin of our solar weather technique of long-range forecasting came originally from study of sunspots and a desire to predict those. And then I realised it was actually much more interesting to use the sun to predict the weather.
Sunspots,
pretty good.
We now know, are intense magnetic fields.
Yes, the
which
sunspots
appear
theory.
at times of higher solar activity. But for many hundreds of years, long before this was properly understood, astronomers around the world used to count the number of sunspots in the belief that more spots heralded warmer weather. In 1893, the British astronomer Edward Maunder observed
So you would prefer to go back to this age of science. That's
that
fair.
during the Little Ice Age, there were barely any spots visible on the sun, a period of solar inactivity which became known as the Maunder minimum. But how reliable are sunspots as an indicator of the weather?
Okay, bye.
Let's find out.
I decided to test it by gambling on the weather through William Hill against what the Met Office said was a normal expectation. And I won money month after month after month after month. Last winter the Met Office said it could be or would be an exceptionally cold winter. We said, no, that is nonsense, it's going to be very close to normal. And we specifically said when it would be cold, i.e. after Christmas and February. We were right, they were wrong.
Fantastic. Why aren't you the one who's administering this stuff then, if that's the case?
In 1991,
I did like your one picture of a winning receipt, but...
senior scientists at the Danish Meteorological Institute decided to compile a record of sunspots in the 20th century and compare it with the temperature record. What they found was an incredibly close correlation between what the sun was doing and changes in temperature on Earth. Solar activity, they found, rose sharply to 1940, fell back for 4 decades until the 1970s, and then rose again after that.
Yeah, I have no idea about this chart at all. I've never seen this one.
When we saw this
it also doesn't look like a great correlation.
And solar activity or sunspot cycle lengths, then people said to us,
From the Danish National Space Center as delivered to us on a VHS tape.
okay, it can be just a coincidence. So how can we prove that it's not just a coincidence? Well, one obvious thing is to have a longer time series or different time series. Then we went back in time.
So Professor Friis Christiansen and his colleagues examined 400 years of astronomical records to compare sunspot activity against temperature variation. Once again, they found that variations in solar activity were intimately linked to temperature variation on Earth. It was the sun, it seemed, not carbon dioxide or anything else, that was driving changes in the climate.
So there we have it. It's the sun. It has nothing to do with humans or production of anything.
In a way, it's not surprising. The sun affects us directly, of course, when it sends down its heat. But we now know the sun also affects us indirectly through clouds. Clouds have a powerful cooling effect, but how are they formed? In the early 20th century, scientists discovered that the Earth was constantly being bombarded by subatomic particles. These particles, which they called cosmic rays, originated, it was believed, from exploding supernovae far beyond our solar system.
Yeah, those were for sure Fooly Cooly brows.
When the particles coming down meet water vapor rising up from the sea, they form water droplets and make clouds. But when the sun is more active and the
Your animation makes me wish for death.
solar wind is strong, fewer particles get through and fewer clouds are formed. Just how powerful this effect was became clear only recently, when an astrophysicist, Professor Nir Shaviv, decided to compare his own record of cloud-forming cosmic rays with the temperature record created by a geologist, Professor Jan Weitzer, going back 600 million years. What they found was that when cosmic rays went up, the temperature went down. When cosmic rays went down, the temperature went up. Clouds and the Earth's climate were very closely linked. To see how
Fantastic.
close, you just flip the lines.
We
Fantastic.
just compare the graphs, just put them one upon the other, and it was just amazing. Jan Weitzer looked at me and says, you know, we have very explosive data here.
I've never seen such
Well, there you go.
vastly different
There's nothing we can do about it, and the sun will take us all.
records coming together so beautifully to show really what was happening over that long period of time.
The climate was controlled by the clouds. The clouds were controlled by cosmic rays. And the cosmic rays were controlled by the sun.
Now, mind you, they've established already that water vapor is a CO2 gas, or is a greenhouse gas. That's all that matters, is we had a scientist say that, so we are set.
It all came down to the sun.
If you had X-ray eyes, what appears as a nice, friendly yellow ball would appear like a raging tiger.
Oh my. Now we're just gonna talk about how awesome the sun is? What's going on here? Yeah, it was amazing how when we were capable of measuring it more accurately, the graph gets worse and worse, isn't it?
The sun is an incredibly violent beast, and it's throwing out great explosions and puffs of gas and endless solar wind.
Awesome. We're just talking about the
forever
sun
rushing
now.
past the Earth.
Pretty good.
We're, in a certain sense, inside the atmosphere of the sun. The intensity of its magnetic field more than doubled during the 20th century.
Fantastic.
In 2005,
Well, there's the answer.
astrophysicists from Harvard University published the following graph in the official journal of the American Geophysical Union. The blue line represents temperature change in the Arctic over the past 100 years. And here is the rise in carbon dioxide over the same period. The two are not obviously connected, but
Not
now look
obviously at
again
all.
at the temperature record. And at this red line,
Uh-huh.
which depicts variations in solar activity over the past century as recorded independently by scientists from NASA and America's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Well, there you go.
Solar
Another perfect
activity over
line.
the last 100 years, over the last several hundred years, correlates very nicely on a decadal basis with sea ice and Arctic temperatures.
I like a
To the
documentary
Harvard
that brings it all together.
astrophysicists and many other scientists, the conclusion is inescapable.
The sun is driving climate change. CO2 is irrelevant.
Well, there you go.
But why, if this is so, are we bombarded day after day?
This
with
is what
news
I've been
items
waiting
about
for.
man-made
What's the
global
motivation,
warming?
please?
Why do so many people in the media and elsewhere regard it as an undisputed fact?
Yes, I beg you, please.
To understand the power of global warming theory, we must tell the story of how it came about.
Oh my.
The weather
Was this made for the BBC? Is that why so many of the sources are BBC?
satellite depicts a planet that grieves for its lost harvests in coming to the parched
Doom-laden predictions about climate change are not new. In 1974, the BBC warned us of impending disasters which might seem strangely familiar.
Again and again, the newsreels have been showing us disasters of the weather. The American Midwest suffered its worst drought since the 1930s, and tornadoes were on the rampage.
See, it's their new god.
Was going to be the cause
they were
of
afraid
these
of these new
disasters?
gods. Yeah, exactly.
The man
I
behind the
see it.
series was former New Scientist editor Nigel Calder.
In the Weather Machine, we reported the mainstream
It's a new god.
opinion of the time, which was global cooling and the threat of a new ice age.
Nature's ice dwarfs us and outstrips.
After 4 decades of falling temperatures, experts warned that a cooler world would have catastrophic consequences.
There's the ever-present threat. of
See,
a big
before they were
freeze.
warning about this.
Will a new ice age
This
claim
was
our
just a
lands
lie
and bury
too.
our northern cities?
But amid the doom and gloom, there was one voice of hope. A Swedish scientist called Bert Bolin tentatively suggested that man-made carbon dioxide might help to warm the world, although he wasn't sure.
And there is a lot of oil, and there are vast amounts of coal left. We seem to be burning it with an ever-increasing rate. And if we go on doing this, in about 50 years' time, the climate may be a few degrees warmer than today. We just don't know.
We were also the first to put Bert Bolin of Sweden on international television talking about the dangers of carbon dioxide.
Trees grow more quickly.
And I remember being bitterly criticized by top experts for indulging him in his fantasy.
Climate hunters.
At the height of the cooling scale,
I've
in the
always
70s,
been called
Bert
a
Bolin's
liar.
eccentric theory of man-made global warming seemed absurd. 2 things happened to change that. First, temperatures started to rise. And second, the miners went on strike. To Margaret Thatcher, energy was a political problem. In the early 70s, the oil crisis had plunged the world into recession, and the miners had brought down Ted Heath's Conservative government. Mrs. Thatcher was determined the same would not happen to her. She set out to break their power.
What we have seen
Excellent.
in this country is the emergence of an organized revolutionary minority
She knew.
prepared to exploit industrial disputes, but whose real aim is the breakdown of law and order and the destruction of democratic parliamentary government.
The politicization of this subject started
They're trying to tear down the government. That's his argument.
With Margaret Thatcher.
She was very concerned always, I remember when I was Secretary of State for Energy, to promote nuclear power. Long before the issue of climate change came up, because she was concerned about energy security, and she didn't trust the Middle East, and she didn't trust the National Union of Mine Workers.
Good.
So she didn't trust oil,
Excellent.
and she didn't trust coal. So therefore she felt we really had to push ahead with nuclear power. And then when the climate change, global warming thing came up, she felt, well, this is great. This is another argument because it doesn't have any carbon dioxide emissions.
Oh, there
This is
we go.
another
So it was a
argument
way to
why we should
push
go for
nuclear? Is
And
that-
that is what she was really largely saying. It's
Okay.
been misrepresented since then.
And so she said to the scientists, she went to the Royal Society and she said, there's money on the table for you to prove this stuff. So, of course, they went away and did that.
Inevitably, the moment politicians put their weight behind something and attach their name to it in some ways, of course, money will flow. That's
Fantastic.
the way it goes. And inevitably, research, development, institutions started to bubble up, if we can put it that way, which were going to be researching climate, but with a particular emphasis on the relationship between carbon dioxide and temperature.
Fantastic. So again, it's the Illuminati. That's what we're saying? Is that once again the British royal family's fucking the planet? Alright, fair enough.
For a new international committee called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC.
They came out with the first big report which predicted climatic disaster as a result of global warming. I remember going
Look
to
at the
the
ears on this
scientific
dude.
press conference and being amazed by two things. First, the simplicity and eloquence of the message and the vigor with which it was delivered. And secondly, the total disregard of all climate science up till that time, including, incidentally, the role of the sun, which had been the subject of a major meeting at the Royal Society just a few months earlier.
But the new emphasis
Boy,
on man-made
that delivery sure took a lot.
carbon dioxide as a possible environmental problem didn't just appeal to Mrs. Thatcher.
No, the hippies loved it too. Everybody loved it. It was a convenient new narrative, is what you're saying. I get it. I've already pieced this together.
Very favorable to the environmental idea, what I call the medieval environmentalism of let's get back to the way things were in medieval times and get rid of all these dreadful cars and machines.
Yeah, it's called primitivism, man. Keep up. Jeez.
They loved it because carbon dioxide was for them an emblem of industrialization.
Well, carbon dioxide clearly is an industrial gas, and sort of tied in with economic growth,
So we want to return to the primitive and become communists.
Transportation in cars.
Listener, this is a fact.
With what we call civilization. And there are forces in the environmental movement that are simply against economic growth. They think that's bad.
It could be used to legitimize a whole suite of myths that already existed. Anti-car, anti-growth, anti-development, and above all, anti that great Satan, the US.
Aha. So Donald Trump was right. This is all a conspiracy to keep the US down.
Patrick
I see.
Moore is
I see.
considered one of the foremost environmentalists of his generation. He is co-founder of Greenpeace.
The shift to climate being a major focal point came about for two very distinct reasons. The first reason was because by the mid-'80s, a majority of people now agreed with all of the reasonable things we in the environmental movement were saying they should do. Now, when a majority of people agree with you, it's pretty hard to remain confrontational with them. And so the only way to
You're saying it's a debate tactic too.
remain
Okay.
anti-establishment was to adopt ever more extreme positions. When I left Greenpeace, it was in the
Except, weren't you arguing that they are the establishment?
midst of them adopting a campaign to ban chlorine worldwide. Like I said, you guys, this is one of the elements in the periodic table, you know. I mean, I'm not sure if that's in our jurisdiction to be banning a whole element.
Destroying the wall were soon done.
The other reason that environmental extremism emerged was because world communism failed, the wall came
See?
down, and a lot of peaceniks
It's a fucking communist plot.
and political activists moved into the environmental movement, bringing their neo-Marxism with them.
Yes!
To use green language in a very clever way
Fucking
to cloak
excellent.
agendas that actually have
I
more
knew
to
this
do
was
with
coming.
anti-capitalism and anti-globalization than they do anything with ecology or science.
The irony being that the capitalists now are the ones I know that don't particularly care for the idea of globalism, and the left is the one who wants a so I'm confused.
To have been slightly disoriented by the manifest failure of socialism, and indeed even more so of communism as it was tried out, and therefore they still remain as anti-capitalist as they were, but they have to find a new guise for their anti-capitalism.
And it was a kind of amazing alliance from Margaret Thatcher on the right.
Why are you... The question I have is, why are you guys still living in the 1980s?
to very left-wing anti-capitalist environmentalists that created this kind of momentum behind a loony idea.
By the
Pretty
early
good.
1990s, man-made global warming was no longer a slightly eccentric theory about climate. It was a full-blown political campaign.
Yeah, Renos,
was
it does. It
attracting
makes
media
exactly about as
attention,
much sense
and
as
as a result,
that. You're
more
dead right.
government funding.
Prior to Bush the Elder, I think the
Oy
level of
vey,
funding
Richard
for
Lindsay.
climate and climate-related sciences was somewhere around the order of $170 million a year, which was reasonable for the size of the field. It jumped to $2 billion a year, more than a factor of 10. And yeah, that
Egg Lord, yeah, exactly that.
changed a lot. I mean,
That's a lot of jobs.
a lot of jobs. It brought a lot of new people into it who otherwise were not interested. So you developed whole cadres of people whose only interest in the field was that there was global warming.
If I wanted to do research on, shall we say, the squirrels of Sussex, what I would do, and this is any time from 1990 onwards.
Yes, I know this is not hard to understand.
I would write my grant application saying I want to investigate the nut gathering behavior of squirrels with special reference to the effects of global warming. And that way I get my money. If I forget...
This is a pretty standard technique that scientists have employed throughout history to get funding. You used to approach a king or a lord or a merchant and explain how you were trying to work on a bauble that would make their lives easier, or could be used to dominate the shipping game, or... This isn't new. This is just how this works.
To mention global warming, I might not get the money.
There's really no question in my mind that the large amounts of money that have been fed into this particular, rather small area of science have distorted the overall scientific effort.
We're all competing for funds. And if your field is the focus of concern, and you have that much less work rationalizing why your field should be funded.
No shit. Oh, so this is in 3 parts. Good. Excellent. At least 3. Let's see where we are. Oh yeah, there's bound to be at least one more cut. Good. Excellent. Oh yeah, we're going to talk about how the space program didn't affect it.
Tens of billions of dollars of government funding in the US, UK and elsewhere were being diverted into research relating to global warming. A large portion of those funds went into building computer models to forecast what the climate will be in the future. But how accurate are those models? Dr. Roy Spencer was senior scientist for climate studies at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center.
Yeah, these conspiracy nuts are second rate.
Exceptional scientific achievement from both NASA and the American Meteorological Society.
Climate models are only as good as the assumptions that go into them, and they have hundreds of assumptions. All it takes is one assumption to be wrong for the forecast to be way off.
Climate forecasts are not new, but in the past, scientists were more modest about their ability to predict the weather.
Any attempt at
Yeah, because they were doing it by hand.
forecasting changes of climate meets skepticism from the men who model the weather by computer.
In making decisions which affect people, a bad prediction as to what the climate of the future will be can be far worse than none at all. I'm afraid that our understanding of the complex weather machine is not yet good enough to make a reliable statement of the future.
In the past, scientists didn't have the same technology or tools available to them, and thus,
All models assume that man-made CO2 is the main cause of climate change, rather than the sun or the clouds.
The analogy I use is like my car's not running very well, so I'm going to ignore the engine, which is the sun, and I'm going to ignore the transmission, which is the water vapor, and I'm going to look at one nut on the right rear wheel, which is the human-produced CO2. It's that, the science is that bad.
Yeah, fantastic, good.
If you haven't understood the climate system, if you haven't understood all the components, the cosmic rays, the solar, the CO2, the water vapor, the clouds, and put it all together, if you haven't got all that, then your model isn't worth anything.
The range of climate forecasts
I don't know anybody who's made a model that doesn't include most of that.
varies greatly. These variations are produced by subtly altering the assumptions upon which the models are based.
The models are so complicated, you can often adjust them in such a way that they do something very exciting.
I've worked with modelers, I've done modeling, and
Yes, models and statistics are not always to be trusted. Go on.
a mathematical model, and you tweak parameters, you can model anything. You can make it warmer, you can make it get colder by changing things.
Since
Yes, of course.
all the models assume that
The Leif
man-made
Erikson is always
CO2
open.
causes warming, One obvious
And yes,
way
it will
to
be
produce
on.
a more
We'll be
impressive
transferring
forecast
there. I have
is
a
to increase.
for the record on the Leif Erikson tonight. I will be airing a documentary about North Korea, made by North Korea to make itself look good, that apparently failed miserably.
Increase the amount of imagined man-made
It will
CO2
be on after Cancer. There will be 1 hour or so of Cancer.
going into the atmosphere.
We put an increase in carbon dioxide in them that is 1% per year. It's been 0.49% per year for the last 10 years, 0.42 for the 10 years before that, and 0.43 for the 10 years before that. So the models have twice as much greenhouse warming radiation going in them as is known to be happening. It shouldn't shock you that they predict more warming than is occurring.
Why are you yelling at me, man?
Models predict what the temperature might be in 50 or 100 years' time. It is one of their peculiar features that long-range climate forecasts are only proved wrong long after people have forgotten about them. As a result, there is a danger, according to Professor Carl Wunsch, that modelers will be less concerned in producing a forecast that is accurate than one that is interesting.
Even
this is like right up there with people that predict the end of the world, and people just move on and then believe them again later.
within the scientific community, you see, it's a problem. If I run a complicated model and I do something to it, like melt a lot of ice into the ocean, and nothing happens, it's not likely to get printed. But if I run the same model and I adjust it in such a way that something dramatic happens to the ocean circulation, like the heat transport turns off, it will be published. People will say this is very exciting. It will even get picked up by the media. So there is a bias. There's a very powerful
Yes,
bias
there's
within the media
clickbait there.
and
Check
within
that
the
out.
science community itself toward results which are dramatizable. The Earth freezes over. That's a much more interesting
Holy
story than
shit.
saying, well, you know, it fluctuates around. Sometimes the mass flux goes up by 10%. Sometimes it goes down by 20%. But eventually it comes back. Well, you know, which would you do a story on? I mean, that's what it's about.
Yes. Congratulations.
To the untrained
Sensationalism
eye,
is bad.
Computer models look impressive,
Please do go on.
and they give often wild speculation about the climate the appearance of rigorous science. They also provide an endless source of spectacular stories for the media.
The thing that has amazed me as a lifelong journalist is how the most elementary principles of journalism seem to have been abandoned on this subject.
On this subject, mind you.
In fact, the theory of man-made global warming has spawned an entirely new branch of journalism.
You've got a whole new generation of reporters, environmental journalists. Now, if you're an environmental journalist, and if the global warming story goes in the trash can, so does your job. It really is that crude. And the reporting has to get more and more hysterical because there are still, fortunately, a few hardened news editors.
Some of us still
Also,
are willing to
you know,
keep
this is what
our
you were
source.
saying
Like,
5 years
really?
ago.
You're
But
painting
now
yourself
it's
as the
much,
hero
much
here,
worse.
man.
You know, there's going to be 10 feet of sea level rise by next Tuesday or something.
Yeah, nobody says any
They
of that.
have to
Thing.
keep on getting shriller and shriller and shriller.
It is now common in the media to lay the blame for every storm or hurricane on global warming. But is there any scientific basis for this?
This is purely propaganda. Every textbook in meteorology
Now, see, this is the
telling
problem.
you the main source.
This is the problem. Is they're right. This is sensationalism to get clicks and sell papers and that kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely, and it is a problem. But that doesn't mean that we're not contributing anything or that we should ignore our contribution. You even have one guy willing to admit that it's contributing, but no, it's not that important. It's not like it's the one thing we can control.
Source of weather disturbances is the temperature difference between the tropics and the pole. And we're told in a warmer world, this difference will get less. Now that would tell you you'll have less storminess, you'll have less variability. But for some reason that isn't considered catastrophic.
So you're told the opposite.
News reports frequently argue that even a mild increase in global temperature could lead to a catastrophic melting of the polar ice caps.
And we all know that's not true.
What does Earth's climate history tell us?
We happen to have temperature records of Greenland that go back thousands of years. Greenland has been much warmer.
We happen to have.
Just 1,000 years ago, Greenland was
We just happen to have temperature records.
warmer than it is today. Yet it didn't have a dramatic melting event.
Even if we talk about something like permafrost, a great deal of the permafrost, that icy layer under the forests of Russia, for example, 7,000 or 8,000 years ago melted far more than we're having any evidence about it melting now. So in other words, this is a historical pattern again, but the world didn't come to a crunching halt because of it.
Professor Siunichi Akasofu is head of the International Arctic Research Center in Alaska. The IARC is the world's leading Arctic research institute. Professor Akasofu insists that over time, the ice caps are always naturally expanding and contracting.
There are reports from time to
Again, yes, this is probably true. Should we still thus ignore our contribution to it?
time. A big chunk of ice break
Oh, big a chunk of rice?
away from the Antarctic continent.
There are
Those
still
must
20
have
minutes
been
left.
happening all the time. But because now we have a satellite that can detect those, that's why they become the news.
This data from NASA's meteorological satellites shows the huge natural expansion and contraction of the polar sea ice taking place in the 1990s.
Practically all the TV programs that relate to global warming show big chunk of ice falling from the edge of the glaciers, but people forget that ice is always moving.
Yes.
News reports frequently show images of ice breaking from the edge of the Arctic.
Yes, this is indeed a image that is used and perpetuated that doesn't actually have a direct effect on what they're discussing, but it is a great image, and that is why it is used.
What they don't say is that this is as ordinary an event in the Arctic as falling leaves on an English autumn day.
They ask me, did you see ice falling from the edge of the glaciers? Yes. That's the spring breakup. That happens every year. Press come to us all the time, you know, I want to see something that the greenhouse disaster. I say there's none.
Alarming television programs raise the fearful prospect of vast tidal waves flooding Britain. But what causes the sea level to change, and how fast does it happen?
Sea level changes over the world in general are governed fundamentally by two factors. What we would call
This is much duller than I thought it would be.
local factors, the relationship of the sea to the land, which often, by the way, is to do with the land rising or falling than anything to do with the sea. But if you're talking about what we call eustatic changes of sea, worldwide changes of sea, that's through the thermal expansion of the oceans, nothing to do with melting ice. And that's an enormously slow and long process.
People say, oh, I see the ocean doing this last year. That means that something changed in the atmosphere last year. And this is not necessarily true at all. In
No,
fact,
it's not.
actually quite unlikely, because it can take hundreds to thousands of years for the deep ocean to respond to forces and changes that are taking place at the surface.
It is also
Luckily, most of the time, they're not talking about the deep ocean, so you've refuted yourself.
suggested that even a mild rise in temperature will lead to the spread northward of deadly insect-borne tropical diseases like malaria. But is this true? Professor Paul Reiter of the Pasteur
No.
Institute in Paris is recognized as one of the world's leading experts on malaria and other insect-borne diseases. He is a member of the World Health Organization Expert Advisory Committee, was chairman of the American Committee of Medical Entomology of
Okay, so we've got another long list of fucking credentials.
the American Society for Tropical Medicine, and lead author on the health section of the U.S. National Assessment of the Potential Consequences of Climate Variability. As Professor Reiter is eager to point out, mosquitoes thrive in very cold temperatures.
Mosquitoes are not specifically tropical. Most people will realize that in temperate regions there are mosquitoes.
No shit.
In fact, mosquitoes are extremely abundant in the Arctic.
Yes, for like a month.
The most devastating epidemic of malaria was in the Soviet Union in the 1920s. There were something like
Yes, when malaria was spread there, and during a very brief, but as usual, because it's very brief, very intense breeding cycle for the local mosquitoes.
13 million cases a year and something like 600,000 deaths.
Because there's zero fucking immunity to malaria among the Russian population.
Tremendous catastrophe that reached up to the Arctic Circle. Archangel had 30,000 cases and about 10,000 deaths. So it's not a tropical disease. Yet these people...
It is, though, because when there aren't people that carry it there from a tropical region, it won't be there naturally.
People in the global warming fraternity invent the idea that malaria will move northwards.
Yes, this is a game of telephone that we're all losing.
Climate scare stories cannot be blamed solely on sloppy or biased journalism. According to Professor Reiter, hysterical alarms have been encouraged by the reports of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC.
Yes, we get it. It comes back to the IPCC. We understand. You've circled back here 3 times.
The spread of
you could have done so in about half the time. This could have been a 45-minute documentary, but instead we're still here.
Malaria, the IPCC warns us that
mosquito species that transmit malaria do not usually survive where the mean winter temperature drops below 16 to 18 degrees Celsius.
According to Professor Reiter, this is clearly untrue.
No, statistically, it is not.
I was horrified to read the second and the third assessment reports because there was so much misinformation without any kind of recourse or virtually without mention of the scientific literature that truly...
Yes, without any mention of your particularly autistic obsession with the malaria spread in the northern regions. Congratulations.
Scientific literature.
Explain to me why there wasn't mass die-outs throughout Europe then, please.
Literature by specialists in those fields.
In a letter to the Wall Street Journal, Professor Frederick Seitz, former president of America's National Academy of Sciences, revealed that IPCC officials had censored the comments of scientists. He said that
this report is not the version that was approved by the contributing scientists.
At least 15 key sections of the science chapter had been deleted. These included statements like,
none of the studies cited has shown clear evidence that we can attribute climate changes to increase...
So we've just leapt back here now, and we're not actually talking about the mosquitoes anymore. Alright, this can't focus.
Gases.
Then again, none of these fucking
No
documentaries
study to date
can.
has positively attributed all or part of the observed climate changes to man-made causes.
Professor Seitz concluded,
I have never witnessed a more disturbing corruption of the peer review process than the events that led to this IPCC report.
Yeah, I've noticed this pattern too. I like the crazier ones, not the ones that are trying to be rational.
In its reply, the IPCC did not deny making these deletions, but it said there was no dishonesty or bias in the report and that uncertainties about the cause of global warming had been included. The changes had
No, they said had not been suppressed.
been made, it said, in response to comments from governments, individual scientists, and non-governmental organizations.
When I resigned from the IPCC, I thought that was the end of it. But when I saw the final draft, my name was still there, so I asked for it to be removed. Well, they told me that I had contributed, so it would remain there. So I said, no, I haven't contributed because they haven't listened to anything I've said. So in the end, it was quite a battle. But finally, I threatened legal action against them, and they removed my name. And I think this happens a great deal.
The irony is that someone threatened legal action against this crew. I don't remember who.
Those people who are specialists but don't agree with the polemic and resign, and there have been a number that I know of, they are simply put on the author list and become part of this 2,500 the world's top scientists.
How?
Research relating
I know there can't be but 10 of the 15 minutes remaining, but fucking how?
to man-made global warming is now one of the best-funded areas of science. The US government alone spends more than $4 billion a year. According to NASA climatologist Roy Spencer, scientists who speak out against man-made global warming have a lot to lose.
It's generally harder to get research proposals funded because of the stands that we've taken publicly. And you'll find very few of us that are willing to take a public stand because it does cut into their research funding.
No shit, again, they just described that.
It is a common prejudice that scientists who do not agree with the theory of man-made global warming must be being paid by private industry to tell lies.
I get it all the time. You must be in the pay of the multinationals. Sadly,
in the pay of the multinationals.
like most of the scientists you will talk to, I haven't seen a penny from the multinationals.
I'm always accused of being paid by the oil and gas companies. I've never received a nickel from the oil and gas companies. I joke about I wish they would pay me, and then I could afford their product.
Whenever anybody says that I'm in the pay of an oil company, I say my bank manager would wish.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way, to be fair. I'm told I'm employed by all kinds of people, but this is the world we live in, friend. Just get used to it. I think next time we will be watching Spirit Science, by the way, and as an FYI.
There is almost no private sector investment in climatology, and yet to be involved in any research project which involves an industry grant, no matter how small, can spell ruin to a scientist's reputation.
Modern technology fueled by greenhouse gases.
Patrick Michaels is Professor of Environmental Sciences at the University of Virginia. He was chair of the Committee on Applied Climatology at the American Meteorological Society, president of the American Association of State Climatologists, the author of 3 books on meteorology, and an author and reviewer on the UN's Intergovernmental...
Yeah, I think Spirit Science would fit better, because this is like, This is really dragging ass, guys.
...on climate change. But when he conducted research which was part funded by the coal industry, he found himself among those under attack from climate campaigners.
British-based corporations are some of the worst climate criminals on the planet.
Climate criminals.
Shell is based in the UK, right here in London. We have the right and the duty to take it back into public ownership, dismantle it, break it up, and send its managers to rehabilitation training.
But reasoned debate is not the only casualty in the global warming alarm. As international public policy bears down on industrial emissions of carbon dioxide, the
Spirit Cooking Science will probably be the title.
developing world is coming under intense pressure not to develop.
So the last part is going to be that this is all a racist plot.
I'm no expert on
it goes beyond astrology.
climate change. I'm no scientist. And what I'm going to say next is a great big turn on. It's just that. Turning off anything you don't need, you're not using. It's easier than you think to make a difference.
Spy music, go.
Delegates from around the world are flying into Nairobi for a conference sponsored by the UN to talk about global warming. Civil servants, professional NGO campaigners, carbon offset fund managers,
as usual, they're just trying to keep the African man down.
Environmental journalists and others will discuss every aspect of man-made climate change, from how to promote solar panels in Africa to the relationship between global warming and sexism. The conference lasts 10 days. The number of delegates exceeds 6,000.
The billions of dollars invested in climate science means there is a huge constituency of people dependent upon those dollars. And they will want to see that carry forward. It happens in any bureaucracy.
Yes. See, that's fundamentally true. There again, this is he's got a point, and then he just goes to straighten up.
Where I live, we have a local council global warming officer. There's a huge...
Yeah, I don't really appreciate that either.
Tail out.
But you guys have tons of garbage piled on garbage in England when it comes to bureaucracy, to be fair. We're headed that way rapidly.
Of people who have, in one way or another, been recruited to join this particular bandwagon.
Anybody who stands up and says, hey, wait a minute, let's look at this coolly and rationally and carefully and see actually how much merit, how much this stands up, they will be ostracized.
Scientists, accustomed to the relative civility and obscurity of academic life, suddenly find themselves publicly attacked if they dare to challenge the theory of man-made global warming, vilified by campaign groups and even within their own universities.
There's the old English saying, if you stand up in the coconut shy, they're going to throw at you. So
Okay, yeah, all right, England, you certainly stole that concept. I mean, that's obviously an old Chinese saying.
I understand that there's going to be some of that, but it gets pretty difficult and pretty nasty and very personal. And there've been, you know, death threats and all sorts of things, and so I'm not doing it for my health.
These days, if you are skeptical about the litany around climate change, you're suddenly like as if you're a Holocaust denier. The environment.
To be fair, they are kind of being treated the same, which isn't entirely fair. I mean, at least Holocaust deniers have a point.
Movement.
That was a joke.
Really, it is a political activist movement. And they have become hugely influential at a global level.
Got the power.
And every politician
Hell
is
yeah.
aware of that today. Whether you're on the left, in the middle, or the right, you have to pay homage to the environment.
In the past month, the global warming campaign has won a great victory. The United States government, once a bastion of resistance, has succumbed. George Bush is now an ally.
Oh my God, they got George Bush.
Western governments have now embraced the need for international agreements to restrain industrial production in the developed and developing world. But at what cost? Paul Driesen is a former environmental campaigner.
My big concern with global warming is that the policies being pushed
Green power, Black Death. Fantastic.
to supposedly prevent global warming are having a disastrous effect on the world's poorest people.
See?
Global warming campaigners say it does no harm to be on the safe side. Even if the theory of man-made climate change is wrong, we should impose draconian measures to cut carbon emissions just in case. They call this the precautionary principle.
The precautionary principle is a very interesting beast. It's
Well,
basically
I've never heard of that.
used to promote a particular agenda and ideology. It's always used in one direction only. It talks about the risks of using a particular technology.
Sir Holy Phoenix, I'm sure they hate the Jews. He just hasn't publicly given it away yet. I'm sure somewhere it's gonna land that he hates the Jews. I mean, let's be serious. It always comes down to that.
Fossil fuels, for example, but never about the risks of not using it. It never talks about the benefits of having that technology.
Anne Muagela is about to cook a meal for her children. She is one of the 2 billion people, a third of the world's population, who have no access to electricity. Instead, they must burn wood or dried animal dung in their homes. The indoor smoke this creates is the deadliest form of pollution in the world. According to the World Health Organization,
That's probably
4 million
true.
children under the age of 5 die each year from respiratory diseases.
Look, I'm really not trying to be a dick. But how is this as far as you've advanced? Seriously, I'm not trying to be a dick. But building a basic chimney system is not difficult. It really isn't. I can show you a guy in Australia that does it for fun. It's not hard.
Caused by indoor smoke, and many millions of women die early from cancer and lung disease for the same reason.
If you were to ask a rural person to define development, they'll tell you, yes, I know I've moved to the next level when I have electricity. Actually, not having electricity creates such a long chain of problems because the first thing you'll miss is the light. So you get that they have to go to sleep earlier because
That sounds
no
awful.
Light. There's no reason to stay awake. I mean, you can't talk to each other in darkness.
No refrigeration or modern packaging means that food cannot be kept. A fire in the hut is too smoky and consumes too much wood to be used as heating. There is no hot water. We in the
You
West
don't
cannot
have to...
begin
Listen, even primitively you don't have to fucking live like this. What is this?
to imagine how hard life
Build a fucking chimney!
is without electricity. The life expectancy of people who live like this is terrifyingly short, their existence impoverished in every way. A few miles away, the UN is hosting its conference on global warming in its plush gated headquarters. The gift shop is selling souvenirs of peasant tribes. life,
For
while
fuck's
delegates
sake.
discuss how to promote what are described as sustainable forms of electrical generation. Africa has coal, and Africa has oil. But environmental groups are campaigning against the use of these cheap sources of
We'll just suck it down. It'll be fine.
Instead, they say Africa and the rest of the developing world should use solar and wind power. A short drive out of Nairobi, we find our first solar panel. A Kenyan public health official has brought us to a clinic which serves several villages. The only electrical implements in the clinic are the electric lights and a refrigerator in which to keep vaccines, medicine and blood samples.
Thank you,
Electricity is
Hitachi!
provided by 2 solar panels.
Yeah.
So what can it do successfully? Lighting. Lighting only? Yes. What happens when you put lighting plus the refrigerator and others? What happens?
It sounds an alarm.
It sounds an alarm?
Yeah.
Then can we maybe see that?
Jesus.
The solar panels allow Dr. Samuel Mwangi to use either the lights or the refrigerator, but not both at the same time. If he does, the electricity shuts
He's essentially a voodoo doctor.
down. Wind and solar power are notoriously unreliable as a source of electricity and are at least 3 times more expensive than conventional forms of electrical generation.
The question would be, how many people in Europe, how many people in the United States are already using that kind of energy? And how cheap is it? You see, if it's expensive for the Europeans, if it's expensive for the Americans, and we are talking about poor Africans, you know, it doesn't make sense. The rich countries can afford to engage in some luxurious experimentation with other forms of energy. But for us, we are still at the stage of survival.
Yeah, I'm looking at this hospital and not thinking you're trying too fucking hard, guys.
To former environmentalist Paul Driesen, the idea that the world's poorest people
Fucking communist Cuba looks better. Come on, guys.
should be restricted to using the world's most expensive and inefficient forms of electrical generation is the most morally repugnant aspect of the global warming campaign.
Let me make one thing perfectly clear. If we're telling the third world that they can only have wind and solar power, what we are really telling them is you cannot have electricity.
The challenge we have when we meet Western environment.
The infrastructure is the problem. Not. Look, they're driving in cars. They have refined gasoline. They have oil. They have coal. The problem is building a power plant and then distributing it without people tearing the shit apart, which they struggle with.
Environmentalists who say we must engage in use of solar panels and wind energy is how we can have Africa industrialized. Because I don't see how a solar panel is going to power a steel industry. How a solar panel, you know, is going to power maybe some railway train network. It might work maybe to power a small transistor radio.
I think
Yeah, you're telling me solar power is only capable of powering a small transistor radio, then you're not using it right, friendo. There are whole houses in the West that are done entirely by solar. I know, I live in a region where it's very popular.
I think one of the most pernicious aspects of the modern environmental movement is this romanticization of peasant life. And the idea that industrial societies are the destroyers of the world.
One clear thing that emerges from the whole environmental debate is the point that there's somebody keen to kill the African dream.
Yep.
And the African dream is to develop.
That's it.
The environmental movement has evolved into the strongest force there is for preventing development in the developing countries.
If you're being told, don't touch your resource, don't touch your oil, don't touch your coal.
Yeah, you're not being told that. People are being influenced to do that, or have no interest in touching at first. You see that, right?
That is suicide.
I think it's legitimate for me to call them anti-human. Like, okay, you don't have to think
I know, okay, people do romanticize peasant life. Yeah, I don't know why. It looks awful.
humans
Peasant life is terrible.
are better than whales or better than owls or whatever if you don't want to, right? But surely it is not
How are we still
a
going?
good idea to think of humans as sort of being scum. You know, that it's okay to have hundreds of millions of them go blind or die or whatever. I just can't relate to that.
It's good that you have assumed this moral high ground. When are you going to Africa and giving up all of your worldly possessions or anything like that? No, you're not. You're just talking shit.
The theory of
You're just talking shit.
man-made global warming
You're just talking shit.
is now so firmly entrenched, the voices of opposition so effectively silenced, it seems invincible. Untroubled by any contrary evidence,
Come on, this
no
is
matter
a
how
wrap, right?
strong.
Yeah, thank fucking God. It
global
runs the whole
warming alarm
15.
is
Fuck
now
off.
beyond reason.
How are there only 1 minute of credits for this? Seriously? You couldn't have given me a little bit of a break on this?
There will still be people who believe that this is the end of the world.
No.
Particularly when you have, for example, the chief scientist of the UK telling people that by the end of the century, the only habitable place on the Earth will be the Antarctic. And humanity may survive thanks to some breeding couples who moved
Oh
to
my
the
God,
Antarctic.
come on, dude.
I mean, this is hilarious. It would be hilarious, actually, if it weren't so sad.
3:15 tonight.
Alright, that's it. We're done. That is the end of this stream. I'd like to thank everyone for being here. This was a good time. I am dropping a broken up link in the chat. Please come here if you'd like, and we will be watching some little videos. As it is, I'm going to go make dinner, because I'm fucking starving. So, that's my plan. See you in Cool Hole, where we will be watching a documentary about North Korea. Thanks for being here, everyone. I love all of you individually and as a whole, and I'll see you later. Bye.